Okay, so the way we envision this meet and greet is that people take turns introducing themselves. So now there's also I hear some background noise. Is that you, Temba, by any chance?
I think it's me. I switch off the mic.
You, I don't know how it works with the phone, but as long as it's to a minimum, that's all right. So maybe if you could introduce yourself, those 3 questions, just for the other people that have joined us, and perhaps Elise will ask you to do it again, but we as more people will join, but at least then we can start the conversation now. So where are you located? Which time zone? How did you find Karl Popper? And what is your favorite book?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
I'm in South Africa, northern part of South Africa. And I found out about Karl Popper from a TED talk by David Dutch.
David Dutch.
Yes.
All right, that's very interesting. Yeah.
I think in the TED talk he did raise a quote by Karl Popper. So I followed up on the name, looked him up. I've actually not even read one book of Karl Popper. What I read is a lecture. It's a lecture titled Objective Knowledge.
All right. Yes.
I've been trying to get the book, The Open Society and its enemies. This part of the world is a...
Okay, so Dijo, where are you located and how did you find Karl Popper, and what is your favorite Popper book? Dijo, are you there?
Okay.
Yes.
Let me introduce myself.
Yes, please.
I'm from the Republic of Korea, South Korea, and I live in the suburban area of Seoul. And my favorite purpose book is Unended Quest. This is Korean version.
Unended Quest, yes.
Unended Quest and Open Society and its enemy and conjectures and reputations and so many things. But for me, I'm when I'm using Facebook too much, but I find Karl Popper's Facebook page. This page was very interesting to me, so I was fascinated by this page. So thank you for Mr. Lucas Castine, and his passion is very good. His passion, he posted Karl Popper's posting on Korean philosophy group. This group is only in Korean language, but your dear Mr. Luke Castine's passion is very great. Yes, so I translated it into Korean language.
All right. So if you look in the chat room, I think I posted we have a Google group.
Yes.
You have already joined the Google group, I think, or
yes,
not?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because then we will talk more with you. Maybe how we can help you spread the word about Karl Popper in South Korea. So welcome. Now let me go to Rafe. Rafe, could you maybe introduce yourself? Now, as a footnote, I should say we have another host. The real facilitator is Elise Hargreaves, and she will be here by 10 o'clock, but I'm just kind of doing the warm-up a little bit. Now, Rafe.
Hello. Yes, I'm in Australia, in Sydney, and it's just 7:30 in the evening right now. I discovered Karl Popper when I was studying, doing postgraduate research in agriculture, and my supervisor brought in the Open Society and its enemies when I said I was going to abandon agricultural science and go and do sociology. So he thought I'd better be prepared for that. And my favourite book is The Open Society, although they've all, basically because it's the first I read, and it's got the most general application for people who aren't interested in the great depths of philosophy of science. But they're all my favourite books now because I think they're all so good. But if people said what to read first, I'd have to say The Open Society. And since it's 700 pages long, I'd have to say you should read my guide, which is 55 pages, or you can listen to a reading of that guide by Elise. So you can listen while you drive your car or you exercise or whatever. And you don't have to read the 700 pages of the original.
Yes, so as you will find out later in the meet and greet, another thing that Rafe hasn't mentioned yet is that he started a website like 20 years ago, the Rat House, and through that website he has been creating awareness about critical rationalism, and that is the way I got to know Rafe, that I found Rafe, because that is a website that discovered 20 years ago. And I didn't know Rafe until 2 years ago in the Critical Rationalism Facebook page. And that's also how I got to know Luc. And Rafe's website is very important because he has a lot of articles that haven't been published yet. And they're kind of hidden. But once you have a feel for the website, then you can find them. So he's a very important resource on the work of Karl Popper and on people who have been writing about Karl Popper. And we have some new people coming in, but they it will take them a while to be here. Now, I think that Dijo, are you hearing us, or are you still away from wherever you are?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Dijo, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Basically, I'm driving the car. I am in UK. Yeah, I'm a software engineer.
In the UK, yeah.
I am very much involved in the rationalist movement in India and in UK, a small group. I have a small group. So I am very much interested to learn more about Popper. I have read a few books of him, Open Society and its enemies. Yeah. So.
And how did you find out about Karl Popper?
Mostly from other friends who has read about that, and because of I am a part of a group of rationalist group in India, I got reference from them. So the most important book I read is like the Open Society and its enemies. So once I read that, like I am very much fascinated about his work, and so yeah.
Oh no. And that is very interesting. So it's not so much through David Deutsch, it's more through the rationalist groups in India. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because there are different ways that people get to Karl Popper. Actually, I should say something about myself then also, because I haven't introduced myself. So my name is Margaret Hendricks. I'm originally from Belgium, but then I went to the United States studying there. And I discovered Karl Popper in 93 or something by picking up a book from a bookshelf, and I had no clue, I had never heard about him. No one of my friends knew anything about him. It was all through reading that book that I discovered him, and he really made a difference in my life. He kind of said things that I had never thought about, that I thought were extremely important. And so I have been thinking with him for the last since 90, that's close to 30 years now. And then 3 years ago, I started talking with Rafe, and then I got to know Luc. And then we started brainstorming and say, how can we create more awareness? Because there are not enough professors who teach Karl Popper. So the university is kind of, they know about him, but they're not really doing anything. Now, my absolute favorite book at the moment is still Objective Knowledge and Evolutionary Approach. I know the other books are also important, but that was the one through which I learned about him, and he really made a difference. And I see Marie-Thérèse showing up. So hello, Marie-Thérèse. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. Could you perhaps introduce yourself? Like 3 questions. So where are you located? Which time zone? How did you find Karl Popper, and what is your favorite book?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yes. Well, I'm from Cairo, from Egypt.
All right.
And now it is 20 to 11 in the
Yes.
morning.
Uh-huh.
And I work at Cairo University. My area is comparative literature
Awesome.
and interdisciplinary studies, yes. To be honest, I am joining because I want to know more about Karl Popper. You see, I always make use of conferences and discussions to know more because, you know, time is so short, you can't get to know everything simply by reading now. You see, you have to listen to others. I think listening to others and listening to having or participating in communal discussions is more important. That's it. Anything more you want to know about me?
Yes. So how did you must have come across the name of Karl Popper for the
Yes.
first time somewhere. So where was that? And
I read a lot in criticism and theory and you see, and so I probably came across Karl Popper about the shaping of theory in the beginning of the 20th century, something of the sort. So yeah.
Okay, because I personally am super interested in the angle from comparative literature. So I'm very glad to that you're here, because I want to pursue that maybe later. Now I put in the chat room links, but just because we have a Google group that we hope that people are going to join so that we can continue the discussion afterwards. But we're also looking for people with particular skills to help spread the word about critical rationalism. But let me now introduce you to Elise Hargreaves, who is actually the facilitator. I don't know whether she's ready to take over. Are you ready to take over? I was doing a little warming up.
Sure. So who do we have here? Let's see. Okay, so has everyone introduced themselves?
I think we
Yeah, I think we have.
Okay, great.
We did it so far, yeah. And
I don't think Luke introduced himself.
He's in the other room.
yeah, some new people are coming in, like someone just joined right now. So another interesting, okay, Elise, why don't you
Yes.
introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Elise, and I came across Popper maybe 7 years ago. I was just really interested in science, and I wanted to find out like who started it and how it started. So kind of led me to Popper. And then since then, just been trying to figure out why no one else is talking about him and how I can help kind of get his work out there, because I think it's really important. Also got some audio books. We got a recent audio book of Rafe's Guide to the Open Society and Its Enemies on Audible, and we're working on a guide to conjectures and refutations at the moment. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, what about your favorite book, Elise?
That would have to be the Open Society and Its Enemies.
Yeah.
I think because like he introduced me to the great generation of these amazing men that I've never heard of before and had said all these amazing things, and I just really resonated with them and felt kind of at home there. So it was nice to have that and find that. Margarita, I was thinking, do we want to add another question to the introduction questions of like, what do you do?
Yes, I could.
Good one.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I'll do it
Definitely.
right now. I'll do it right now.
Yeah.
Reposting it with the question. Now, since, okay, let me, most people that are here today, I have the impression are here for the first time. So therefore, I would like to give a little background. So we did our first meet and greet in 21. And we did it for dus Rafe, Elise, Luc. We are this. So what do you do? Yeah, I'm about to. Okay, I'm. Yeah, sorry. What do you do? Okay. So in 21, we did it for the first time, and we did it 24 hours because we are living all over the world. So we wanted to give everyone an opportunity to participate when it is convenient for them. And the team then was just meet and greet and socializing, and we didn't really have any specific team, but various students of Popper participated then. And then we did it again in 22, and we made sure to record every single session, but they haven't been posted yet because it took us a while to process them. But then we had a team, and the team was to celebrate all the people that had worked with Karl Popper's philosophy, the one that were still living and the one that had passed on. And then the theme for this year is going to be skill sharing. So we will be discussing the philosophy of Karl Popper, but we also will be discussing how can we help each other create more awareness for it. And the reason we picked that theme is first because the four of us, Luc, Rave, and Elise, we realized we need help to do those 24-hour things because we couldn't do the 24 hours today because we just need help. It's too much work for 4 people. But number two, we discovered there are not too many professors at universities who specialize in Karl Popper. So we are the ones who are going to need to keep his philosophy alive, and we're maybe going to need to teach the professors why they should pay attention to Karl Popper. But how do we do that? So for that reason, the team became the sharing of skills and networking. And so for that reason, we have a little Google group to stay in touch with one another. And so now, Elise, I'm going to give it back to you because I see new people who joined and that probably need to introduce themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to the main room,
Sure.
to the entrance room to see what's going on there.
Yeah.
Joe,
Thank
Walk,
you, Margarita.
okay, all right.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah.
I think Joby, I think you came in first. Did you want to introduce yourself and tell us how you came across Karl Popper? Joby, am I saying that right? If you can hear me? Yeah, you're on mute as well. So you just have to click the unmute button down there. If you're on your phone, I'm not sure where it is. Oh, he's gone. Oh no, there he is.
Let me introduce myself.
Yeah, I got it.
Oh wait, there he is. We'll come back to you, Kane, if that's okay.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, myself Joby, and I'm basically from India, the southern side of India. It's called Kerala. I'm a fellow who is a social activist and concentrating on the liberal democracy, and a friend of Karl Popper. Probably I'm, a student. Probably I just started reading by the Karl Popper and find out that there is much similarity in our context of Indian politics. So personally, I'm a fellow who love the nature, and I do have a forest which I created my own for a 2-hectare place. And technically I am from the IT background, doing the delivery head role in the service-oriented IT business.
And what's your favorite book from Karl Popper?
I mean the enemies of. I mean the.
Open Society and Its Enemies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that because you can find that it relates to the current politics in India at the moment?
Exactly. I mean, in Indian context, it is based on we could say the Chadurvarnya. That is more like a class-based. The system was there in long before, and the politics is formed such a way that how the division of the caste, and then how the votes can be populated based on the caste, and then it is came. That is the way the major political organizations are working. So, the liberal democracy is something, it is, a small group is practicing over here, and they don't have much voice in the, mainstream politics. But, the people who believe openness, trust, democracy, and who passion with the nature, they are not strong team, but there is a presence is there. So when we read on the thoughts of Karl Popper, I have seen a similarity of the things which we practice and what we are seeing in the lessons of the Karl Popper. So I thought of actually how these situations are addressing in the other side of the Western countries. So maybe though we are a large democratic place, when the things is coming in practice, the text and the ground realities are different. So I thought of actually whether these situations are similar in the Western place, or do we have something which I can learn from them, from this group? That was my intention.
That's very smart. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So Kane, I believe that did you want to introduce yourself as well? I hope I'm saying your name correctly.
Yes, it's correctly. My correct name is Kang Kyung-hun. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm from South Korea and the Republic of Korea, and I'm interested in Karl Popper. I have interested in Karl Popper 10 years ago. My favorite book is Unended Quest by
Oh,
Korean version.
nice. I love that book. Yeah.
And I followed your YouTube channel.
Oh, my YouTube channel. That's great. So, what do you do?
I translated. I like Mr. Kastai's Facebook page, and I translated into Korean language so many postings.
And how did you find Karl Popper?
When I was when 10 years ago, I was interested in philosophy, and I found the booksellers in library, and then found the book. The book name was in the searching for a better word and solving the problem.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, it's great to have you here. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Joe, I believe you entered as well. Did you want to introduce yourself and tell us about you a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Elise. Nice to meet you, everyone. Nice to see you again,
Nice
Rafe.
to meet you.
I'm Joe.
Hi.
Yeah, you too. Apologies if there's some whining in the background. I have a young puppy here in the room with me, but I'm based in Sydney. I have a couple of hats at the moment. I work in the startup world and I host a podcast. I can't really remember when I first encountered Karl Popper. Would have been 5 to 10 years ago, probably through the writings of some other authors, maybe Nassim Taleb. Maybe the first book of Popper's I read was The Poverty of Historicism. But if I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be Objective Knowledge.
Yeah, that's a good one. So
and I also like
yeah.
Also, also a big fan of Rafe's summary of the Open Study and its enemies.
It's a good guide.
It is.
Nice.
So wait, you're the Jolly Swagman podcast?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
me.
Have we spoken before? I feel like I've probably reached out to you, didn't I?
Yeah, I think
Did
I think you emailed when you published the audiobooks, and I might have shared it in my
Yes.
newsletter.
Yes, I
Sometime
remember.
last
I
year.
remember that now. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's
yeah.
awesome to have you here. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, of course.
Can I just say that's a really quality podcast. It's a real class act. So it's a great acquisition to have Joe on the team.
Thank you so much.
You've had some big people on the show, right?
Yeah, yeah. Some big names, over 140 conversations now, and hopefully a few more to come.
That's really good. Do we have anyone new that entered? Not yet. Okay, so today, Maggie? Have we heard from Maggie? Maggie, are you here? Maybe she's unavailable. So the theme of this meet and greet is to see if we can kind of work together and combine our skills to help spread the works of Karl Popper so they're more well known. So we've got a couple of things that we've put together that for everyone to kind of keep in touch and network and things like that. So if you have any projects, you can list your project, and then someone can come in and say, I can help you with this, or we can help each other in this way. So I think if you guys can see the chat, I'm not sure if I can just copy and paste this. But at the bottom of the screen, there's like a chat box. And if you click that, then we've got some links in there. So we've got like a Google group that you can join. The second link is a document. It's an Excel document for networking. So you can just put your name down, your email address, what you're interested in helping out with and things like that. And then everyone's going to have access to that spreadsheet. So we can all kind of keep in touch.
Yes, and I'm very,
Margarita I'll just let her know to put herself on mute.
You can remove her voice.
Oh, I can mute it myself, can I?
So it's informal, it's socializing one another and not.
Who's host? Rafe, are you host?
Who do you want muted?
The session recorder.
Oh, okay. Right.
There, you got it.
Wow,
Okay, cool.
I can turn people off, can I?
Yeah, you've got the ultimate power.
Yeah.
Oh, she's back. So Daijo has Daijo introduced themselves? Rafe, do you know?
I think he did, but I'm losing track.
Yeah. I think we're going to have people just kind of coming and going throughout the night.
Yes, I have. Sorry, I was on mute and I could not find the unmute
Oh,
button.
no worries.
I already introduced myself. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, great.
Hello, Francisco.
Hello, everybody. Hi,
Hello.
Ralph. How you doing?
So we're just kind of introducing ourselves. Did you want to introduce yourself and let us know what you do, how you came across Popper, what's your favorite book?
Okay, my name is Francisco Di Iorio. I'm an associate professor of philosophy at Nankai University in Tianjin, China. My research interests focus on the philosophy of the social sciences. Originally I'm from Italy, but I did my PhD in France at l'École des hautes études en sciences sociales and l'École Polytechnique. Then I did a postdoc at the Duke University and a postdoc at Sorbonne University in Paris. And after that, I held teaching positions in France, Italy, and I moved to China about 7 years ago. I'm very interested in Popper, and I'm interested in Popper because my two mentors, Dario Antiseri, who is an Italian philosopher, and Jean Petitot, who is a French philosopher and mathematician, are both Popperian, and so they influenced me. They invited me to read Popper. My favorite Popper book is I like maybe I would say The Poverty of Historicism.
Then hello.
Francisco
Di Iorio. How nice it is to meet you. I've cited you extensively in my work.
Oh, okay. Good.
I've written on Mises and Popper quite a bit.
Oh,
so
yeah. I'm also interested in the Austrian School of Economics.
Yeah, the one on it was on mythological individualism, I think, was the topic of the book. I've forgotten the name, yeah. But you had a chapter on Popper and Mises that was quite useful.
Oh, okay.
So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
John Sardin is my name. Yeah. Oh, is Elise out there as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, John. How are you?
Hi. How you doing? So we're over in the East. So Francisco, you're in China, is that true?
Yes, I'm in China, right.
Okay, and Elise is down under.
Sorry, I cannot hear you very well.
Elise is down under.
Yes, in Australia.
Australia,
John,
I'm in Vienna.
yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself, John? Let us know who you are, what you do, how you came across Popper, and your favorite book.
Sure. Okay. My name is John Santino. I just finished my thesis and master's degree in philosophy of science. My subject was Karl Popper and Social Democracy. The title of my thesis. I teach at a Austrian gymnasium. That is to say, kind of an academic high school where university-bound students, and I'm making lots of Popperians out of them, as many as I can. And I got interested in Popper in the course of my studies. My professor is a major Popperian, Carl Milford, who actually has had a personal relationship also with Karl Popper. That goes back to New Zealand as well, yeah. And so that's how I got interested in it, and I would say that Popper has really he solved so many philosophical problems and just answered so many open questions that I had for years and years, teaching philosophy, that I just sort of was this aha experience every single time I read him. It was like, okay, I'm glad somebody fixed that problem, one after the other, from the problem of demarcation and induction to the whole, to me, his fallibilism is such a perfect solution to the problem of relativism on one side and absolutism on the other side. There's like, you don't have to be a dogmatic, EP1, a priorist rationalist, to avoid, just as a response to the onslaught of relativism. There's this fallibilist way, which is the rational way. And my favorite book, I think, is the Open Society and Its Enemies, which I think is very sophisticated, also on moral philosophy, political philosophy, also on his philosophy of science. His discussion of, it's like the bringing together of his philosophy of science with his moral philosophy, and so for me, it's the deepest book he has.
Yeah, it's my favorite too.
Yeah. His discussion of the Great Generation and
yeah,
the whole, it's sort of like the bringing together of freedom and equality. Like they're not opposites in Popper. They're the same, two sides of the same coin somehow. Yeah. And I think that's really important, for the rationalist tradition, the egalitarian rationalist tradition that he represents, egalitarian tradition and liberalism. Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, John. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Steve, I noticed that you joined us as well. Did you want to quickly introduce yourself? Let us know what you do, how you came across Popper, and your favorite book.
Well, that would be, yeah, I think I can do that.
Thank you.
My name is Steve Frank. I guess my name is up there on the site. I am not a professional philosopher. I do have a undergraduate degree earned back in the dark ages in 1977, I think.
Steve is frozen somehow for me.
I discovered Popper in the late 60s, early 70s from my own independent reading. It was not taught in university. Just basically, I think the first book I came across was The Logic of Scientific Discovery. Of course, that led directly into reading Open Society and Its Enemies, parts 1 and 2, which I found a lot of success in both books in terms of helping me with problems that I had come to studying the canon of intellectual history, which was really my main concern. I've studied the history of ideas. As to what I actually do for a living is I'm an evil capitalist. I invest money and start businesses and do various things. Also dabble in politics. I've been involved with local governments and state government, a few national issues here in the Northern Kentucky, state of Kentucky area. So I have some practical experience trying to come up with, talking to people with different backgrounds and ideas and trying to come to some fruitful resolutions. So if nothing else, I try to stay informed. I see Rafe Champion and we go all the way back to the original Popper boards on America Online. So we've been batting the ball around for, I don't know, about 30 years. And I just enjoy that this has moved, this conversation has moved to a wider realm. And I wish more people understood and appreciated the thought of Karl Popper. One of the things and observations I made of late, I've been involved a little bit more viewing things on YouTube because I find it's just a nice way to turn many pages at once to find a subject and then maybe go deeper by reading books, is how little developed Popper's thought has in what seems to be a way more people are discovering new ideas. Where I would see 100,000 views on Foucault, I would see 60 on a Popper video, and I'm going, well, wait a minute, we're losing if we're trying to spread anti-relativism. If what we're doing is trying to educate a couple students here and there, we need to find more ways to mass influence people
on the mass media. Yeah.
So that's my background.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Well, that's a really good a lead into really why we've decided to meet and do this 12-hour meet and greet. Oh, Rafe, would you mind muting Joby?
Who's that?
Joby.
Oh.
Yeah.
Couple of cats fighting in the background there.
Right.
Oh, try again. I think he unmuted.
No, he's... I'll turn Francisco off since he's not talking now.
Yeah, and Joe, can you get Joby? Joby, would you mind putting yourself on mute?
Oh, sorry. I thought I'd muted it.
There we go. No, I think he's pressing mute every time you press mute. So can you do it again? Yeah, leave it. Okay. Yeah, so we just asked that if you aren't speaking, just to put yourself on mute, just in case there's any kind of feedback or anything like that. But basically the theme of today's meet and greet is to, like what Steve was saying, is to discuss ideas and discuss ways that we can get Popper's ideas out there and projects that we are all kind of working on, that we can collaborate with each other. So we've put together a Google document, an Excel document, which will be available for everyone. So if you want to just put down your details in there, put in some links to your stuff so that everyone can have access to it. And what projects you're working on, and if you're looking for any help, or if you're able to give some of your time and your skills to other people's projects around the world. Yeah, so that's basically what we're here, just to brainstorm how we can all kind of collaborate and you know, get more of Popper's ideas to the mass media. So I'm not sure if everyone can see that in the chat, but I'll just copy and paste it again. And if you go down to the bottom, you can see the chat option, and then that should bring up the links that we have. And then you can add your details in there, and then we can all kind of keep in touch. Okay, so Tim, I noticed that you joined us as well. Did you want to introduce yourself? Let us know what you do, how you came across Karl Popper, and what your favorite book is.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, I've been reading Karl Popper for a number of years now. Favorite book? I mean, the first book I read was The Open Society, but I Conjectures and Refutations. So I appreciate the book that the audio book that you did for that. That's online. I mean, just generally thinking about the subject matter of this discussion, the idea of whether I don't know whether I'm jumping the gun here by talking about this, but with the idea that Popper's you know, a Popper society is like a cult. I think that Popper would be horrified by the idea that he would be you know, an authority to be followed like cult-like. You know, I think he was always very clear that he didn't really want to persuade anybody. He wanted to put his ideas out there, and then those ideas speak to people, not him. The person is irrelevant. It's the ideas, it's the thinking, it's the thought process, it's criticism, and that's what appeals to me about Popper. That it's very open, and it's not cult-like. It's not a closed creed. It's certainly a definite way of thinking, which seems to be, you know, it seems that if you listen to anything on intellectuals discussing things, and you know, they all seem to be hung up on ideas that surely Popper should have dealt with. You know, if they just read Popper, they shouldn't be just having this discussion anymore. Ideas about the nature of knowledge, you know, about, you know, epistemological questions, worrying about certainty. Surely, why isn't the intellectual world, why haven't they got over that and realised that, why haven't they read Popper? That's what I'd like to know.
Well, Tim, we take your point. I'm taking your
Can I respond, please?
Not being a cult. It's really important that we don't. I think we put the idea of critical rationalism out in front.
Just
and
one moment, John.
In some sense, behind them. We can't avoid talking about Popper, but we want to talk more about the ideas.
Hello?
Yeah. Is that John? I think you might be frozen. But that's very true, Rafe. Thank you for sharing that, Tim. So who do we have that's joined us? Yeah, John, you were just on, you just froze. Yeah.
Yeah,
so you can,
I froze, and apparently everything else froze on my screen as well. I was just going to respond. First of all, I was just going to ask, who's the last speaker? Tim, his name was?
Yeah, Tim Stevenson.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Tim, where are you from? I mean, I don't think you're in the Grand Canyon or wherever that was behind you. I guess you're from England.
And you're on mute.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Okay, so you hear me now? Yeah, this background picture is from when I was on vacation in Iceland. So
Iceland, okay.
Beautiful waterfall there in Iceland, and
it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. Where are you actually coming in from?
I'm actually in East Riding of Yorkshire, in England.
Yorkshire. I should have known by the accent.
Yes. Sorry if you can't understand what I said.
No, I can understand everything. I had a Yorkshire a nanny from Yorkshire when I was a kid. She was from Leeds. What was I going to say? Yeah, I totally identify with what you just said. I was just watching some of these, you know, very popular debates between Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson. Yeah. Back and forth. And so many times I was like, God, guys, why don't you just read Popper? You would figure this out. You know, they get into these dead ends in their conversations. It's like, you know, Sam Harris is stuck in the this, you know, search for certainty, and Peterson is like stuck on this, you know, a rarefication of tradition over everything else. It's sort of like, you know, all these problems that Popper solved, but they're debating it. You know, thousands and thousands of people there in the audience, and they're like, okay, why are they running into a brick wall every time? Because they haven't read Popper. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, this constant search for, you know, how are we going to find this foundation so we can know whether we're right? Where's that foundation? Well, there isn't.
There isn't. There isn't. There isn't. Everything dissolves into an infinite regress. You know, you can't just. It's a delusion to think that you find some kind of certainty. It's like, as David Miller says, you don't need reasons. You need reason, and to actually argue the point. You know, it's the intersubjective dialogue that gets the truth, and not some kind of dogmatic
But
stopping point of the infinite regress.
Yeah, I suppose the argument in people who might think it's a cult following is people would say, well, you keep bashing everybody over the head with this idea, but it's frustration that they can't see that they're coming at the problems in a way that's never going to work. And if you keep saying the same things, people will say you're following an idea in a cult-like way and not open to criticism. But we are open to criticism, I think. It's just that the fact that certain ideas have not been refuted and are our best way of thinking about the world, and this is what we're presuming that we all think, doesn't mean we're in a cult.
Now you make me curious how many of my students think I'm in a cult.
Yeah, I haven't seen too much about that for Popper. Is that online that people are saying that, Tim?
Well, I know this is the theme of that was mentioned in the description of today's event about the cult. I mean, I suppose any kind of set of ideas which are around an individual are going to lead to people accusing us of following a certain way of thinking in a cult-like sort of slavish way. But I mean,
sorry, can I interrupt? Because somebody got a very interfering noise on the line.
Yeah, Tim, would you mind just putting yourself on mute for a sec? Because I think it might be you.
Well, that's done it.
Yeah. So there's just a little bit of feedback, Tim, on your line, but we can still understand you, but it's just a little bit of a noise. But yeah, I definitely agree that if some people can label it as a cult incorrectly, just because they're just kind of being judgmental without looking further into it. Harry,
I just want to say, if you respond with, I may be wrong, you may be right, and with an effort we get closer to the truth, somehow that is like the most anti-cultish thing.
Yeah, anti-cultish, yeah.
You just gotta emphasize that over and over, right?
Yeah. Harry, did you want to introduce yourself? Let us know who you are, what you do, how you came across Popper, and what your favorite book is.
The last one is a bit tricky. Right. Okay, I'm retired. I live in Oxford, and that's Oxford, England. I first came across the work of Popper 50 plus years ago through the logic of scientific discovery, and have read pretty much everything written by him since then, and particularly interested in some of his the stuff that was published after his death, and a number of works written about him, and probably an equal volume of things written about him, mainly favorable, people like Jeremy Sherman and so on, but also critical, Cornforth and others. Right, well, so that's background and knowledge about Popper. Favorite books, I haven't really thought, perhaps because I came to it first, logic, but then there are so many other things. Some of his, can't remember the work, the relatively recently published work, which included the 1986 Meadower lecture, I found quite interesting. I don't know, it's just too.
Was it Unended Quest?
Oh no, the Unended Quest, of course, yeah, because I came across that. I think when it was published as part of the Shilp edition, and of course I give copies of the Unended Quest away to people it's a combination of that or the Brian McGee book, which I find actually in some ways a better introduction to his work for people who aren't familiar with philosophy in general or with his work in particular.
Harry, could it be the Myth of the Framework? You mean the book, The Myth of the Framework?
No, the one I was referring to, gosh, all my Popper books, box full, are actually, which isn't to hand, are upstairs. No, it's there's a German whose name begins with N, who's done an edition of including about his work, including the 1986 Medawar lecture, which wasn't published at all until it was included in that volume. So that's not a book by him, but it's a book about him with some of his work in it. I've struggled with some of his other works that I've looked forward to seeing in English. There's I've forgotten the title, La Jeunesse. His writings as a young man that's appeared in a French edition, taken from the archive somewhere, I guess. But so it's a French edition of Popper's work, some of it translated from German, and some from English, I guess, but mainly from German, which I've struggled with because my French isn't so good. But I'm very interested to look at some of his earlier writings as a sort of way of understanding the background to his thinking. Although many of his thoughts, I think, did improve with in later times. My interest at the moment is, sorry, I was talking to my interest at the moment is mainly to see how I dropped Popper really from terms of study. I'd read every new book as it came out, the Barclay editions and so on. But I didn't really do anything with it. And I thought, and I haven't used it in my professional life at all. I worked in computing, but I was thinking I needed to become more active politically and wondered what I could find about his work that would help guide me in making decisions. I feel we live in very troubled times. The word fascism springs to mind as something that's becoming seemingly more likely to happen in the coming years throughout parts of Europe, not everywhere, and sometimes even going in the opposite direction. But in the United States, it troubles me because that's the bellwether for so much international politics, and of course Russia itself, Britain, Hungary, Poland, Israel, sadly, all sorts of places where one sees the rise of unpleasant right-wing regimes, Turkey, Iran. Sorry, I should stop.
Well, it's like Popper said, we're still in the very beginning stages of this new thing called the Open Society. So we're still in the birth stages. So hopefully with some more time, the Open Society can become a lot more popular.
Yes,
I like your optimism.
I'm slightly less optimistic because I think that it needs work. So that's perhaps why I'm here today. But it also, I think, needs an understanding of why these ideas have such a strong hold on us, on all of us. And it's all very well and good saying, my ignorance is infinite, and lots of other good things that one can say about one's own thinking. But how much do we actually put that into practice? I'm not sure I do. I'm very conscious how other people fail to, sadly. And I think that understanding that at a psychological, sociological level may be important as well. Certainly for me. I don't know if we'll ever get agreement on why all of that is. I'm sure it's buried deep in our fish ancestry.
Yeah, well, and like Popper says, he explains it as something to do with the strain of civilization. I think it might have something to do with that strain and how some people struggle with the strain and feel the pressure of it and want to go back to how it was when there was less responsibility, so they let other people make decisions for them. So it might have something to do with that. But nevertheless, thank you so much, Harry, for sharing your story with us. I'm not sure if you mentioned, but how did you stumble? What got you into Popper? Like, how did you find him?
really quite simple. There was somebody who was briefly a fellow lodger of mine. I was living in tenanted accommodation, and a fellow lodger of mine was doing a doctorate in philosophy. He was actually, I think, the last student of Gilbert Ryle. Many of you will have heard of Gilbert Ryle, and he was German. I'm sorry, the student is not Ryle. Although Ryle actually had a very good command of German, which is why I felt he was ahead of a lot of the British English language philosophers. But he needed help in turning his doctoral dissertation into English, and this was an ongoing thing, and I tried to help him with that. And so we would start off discussing a sentence, and maybe 6 or 7 hours later, we still hadn't come to an agreement on the exact precise formulation that was required. But we both learned something. I think I'd learned more than him, but it was he who recommended that I read Popper, whose thinking he described as being one that he close to mine, or sorry, put it the other way around. Mine was close to Popper's, and that I would certainly learn something from it. And so it turned out. I mean, that's why I started with logic der Forschung for that reason, and then I went on to all his other writings as a consequence of that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I think Anikit, if I'm saying that correctly, just joined. If you can hear us, did you want to introduce yourself? Let us know what you do, where you're from.
Yes, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Anikit.
Rafe, would you mind quickly muting? Chris? Sorry, Anikit, just one moment.
That's all.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rafe. Yep, go on, Anikit.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I was trying to get my video to go, but maybe it's okay. Yeah, I'm Aniket. I'm here from Orlando, Florida. Thanks for letting me in. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing everybody speak here. I am sort of got introduced to Popper through David Deutsch a few years ago. So I'm relatively new. But yeah, I mean, it's very exciting. It's actually early in the morning, but I was excited to join here in Florida. So
wonderful.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you for joining us. Do you have a favorite book by Popper that you like?
Conjecture and Refutations for sure. And then
Yeah.
I have the, I'm looking at the title of it, Realism, an Aim of Science. I have it here open. So yeah, those two are for sure changed my thinking a lot about how to think about science. Professionally, I'm a scientist working for a software company, and I see my thinking change even in day-to-day life. There's a lot of things that could be learned. I have 2 kids, so even dealing with kids, it's also yeah, your perspective changes a lot. So very very excited to join. So
yeah, I think a lot of people can definitely relate to that. I know I can. Just having discussions with people, I find are a lot easier with the attitude of I might be wrong, you might be right. I feel like discussions just went smoother when people have that attitude rather than kind of aggressive. I definitely found that.
Yeah, totally.
Wonderful.
Totally.
Thank you for sharing. Chris, did you want to introduce yourself? Let us know what you do, how you came across Popper, what your favorite book is. You just have to unmute yourself as well, just quickly. Rafe, would you be able to unmute him?
Yeah, I'm trying.
There we go. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. I'm a physicist, and my research background is astronomy and quantum mechanics. And during my studies in quantum mechanics, I came to know about Karl Popper some 20 or 30 years back. Now I am a retired professor of physics. But I, from that day, from 30 years back onwards, I believe that Karl Popper is the most relevant philosopher capable of coordinating different branches of science and epistemology. And without his guideline, it is almost impossible to go forward, especially in this juncture that we, after the, I think every epoch needs its own philosophy. And I personally believe Immanuel Kant was a philosopher during the Renaissance period. After that, the most important philosopher who is able to coordinate different branches of science and epistemology is Karl Popper. And it was he who realized the importance of our ignorance. So rather than our knowledge, it is our ignorance which has got larger volume. And we have to admit that I may be wrong and you may be right. Let us discuss. That is the most important philosophy that is required in this. And every year, uh, uh, because of recent Russia and Putin, so many international in India also, we are also facing the some sort of fascism that we call Hinduism. And so I cannot reveal all these things. Still, Karl Popper philosophy is the most relevant philosophy capable of guiding the real scientists in the proper way. That is, and we have to work together. And another against nationalism, so-called nationalism, is just an extension of tribalism. So-called nationalism is an extension of tribalism. So what we need an internationalism. And for that, we have to be with science and philosophy of Karl Popper to guide us and go further. That's my simple point of view. Okay, thank you. Okay,
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Could I ask something, Anissa? Are you chiming in from India?
Yeah, I'm from India.
What do you think about developments there?
In fact, I am living in the southern part of India, a southern state known as Kerala. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm just wondering, what do you think about
So
like political
if we are
developments?
talking that we're saying India, that means most of the people in India thinks that there are different nationalities in India. That is because of cultural difference, because of language difference. So I belong to a small part of India known as Kerala, that is southern part. And this state is ruled by a communist leader. Are you getting it?
Yeah.
The state is ruled by a leader. Chief minister is a communist leader, and his name is Pinarayi Vijayan.
Did you say communist?
Communist.
He is
Communist.
Yeah.
Communist. Oh, okay. Interesting. I didn't know that.
Okay.
Yeah.
He is,
I thought India was
he is
going
the
much more
leader
direction
of communists. And we all believe that those who are ruling India is from Delhi. And he is not simply a fascist, but also a fascist with all casteist tint. Hinduism. So
Hindu
we used
nationalism.
and from my personal experience, we have realized both are same. Both are same. The Marxist and the fascist are same, and both are against science, culture, democracy, liberal democracy, and against civilization. against civilization. And only consolation we have, people like me, have is our civilization is still in its infancy. So we can see all these problems. And I'm actually quoting Karl Popper when I'm saying our civilization is still in its infancy. So fascism and Marxism are two of bifurcations of the philosophy against civilization, enemies of civilization. So I personally believe, and from my first-hand experience, I can see that both are same. And
Popper would agree for sure.
we are trying to arrange a good many people for democracy against two things: fascism on one side and Marxism on the other side. So best philosophy that we can adopt is philosophy of Karl Popper. And personally, I have translated good many words of Karl Popper into my own language, Malayalam. When I say my own language, there are good many languages in India, and Malayalam is my language. Anyway, and because for that purpose, that they have some 10 years back or 8 years back formed open society group and similar discussion group, etc. And we have got some political connections also, political connections which promotes liberal democracy.
Good work. That's really good. So just kind of, I guess, touching on what Chris is talking about, and it's kind of collaborating with other people. I noticed that Luck just put in the chat, we're kind of spreading around for this meet and greet. So it's an online document that you can open up and everyone's going to have access to it. So if you want to just put in your information, your name, email address, what you're working on, if you're looking for help with any projects or you're able to help in anyone else's projects. So it's like a international collaborative, document that we can all access. If people want to do that. Does any open the floor to any kind of particular topic or discussions or questions that anyone wants to ask anyone else? Not yet.
Chris, can I have a question, Chris?
Yeah, Joby, you have a question for Chris?
Yeah, Chris, you've been suggesting that the communists and so Hinduism, these both are same. Are you saying it is because of the leaders' problem or the thought process of communism? They believe decentralizations, they believe openness, they believe on trust, and all the philosophy which Karl Popper is saying, they also believe it. Are you saying it is the communist also failing as a concept or as an individual? Some individuals are failing so that, we are not able to make up with the communism.
Hey, is Joby?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's okay.
Because I know that in different place in the western side, they are thinking maybe the left side, the communist government can be made the revolutions against the corporate policies, or probably they think that when communists came, it will be a paradigm shift. But in your experience or in our experience, you are seeing that though there is a small part in India, Kerala, they lead the communism, and the concepts itself in the ground reality failing. Are you saying in the same line, or is it something I am on the wrong side?
Chris? Do you have a response for Joby?
Chris?
Maybe he can't hear us anymore. Yep. Can you hear us, Chris?
Hello?
Yep. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you hear what Joby said?
Joby is my friend and a good associate, working almost in the same line. So let me introduce Joby. He's a software engineer. Have got international reputation, and he also working with us in liberal democracy. But I think we have discussed so many things, and I am happy, and just like Joby, to hear from you that explanation from your side rather than from my side, because we belongs to the same part of the globe and almost having the same line of thinking for the last 20 years rather. Okay. And I think
I'd like to ask Francisco a question. Francisco,
yes.
You're located in China, and I think your views on the prospects for democracy in China would be interesting, or the prospects for a relaxation of the dictatorship, or something, some hint of a move in the direction of an open society.
Well, you know, to be honest, I feel a bit uncomfortable to answer this this question, because, you know, it's a sensitive topic here. I don't know. I mean, you know, during the last years, I mean, I don't think that China is going to become a democracy anytime soon. That's my my answer. And well, there are different problems. One is a cultural problem, because, you know, there is a strong difference between the industrial, the rich cities, coastal cities, and the rural areas in China. In the rural areas, we still have a clan culture, which means that imagine that there are free elections. If there is, imagine, okay, there are free elections, all the people from the same village would vote for the same party or the same candidate, because they would follow the suggestions of the elderly people in the village. So, you know, this is a major cultural problem which doesn't make democracy possible in huge areas in China. Then you know, I don't know about what is going to happen from a political standpoint, but as I told you, I would prefer not talking about that. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, let me ask you another question. This relates to the conference that you're convening for the Southeast Asian Association of Sociology. Is Popper strongly represented in those academics in that association, apart from yourself?
Well, I would say yes, because, you know, I'm one of the founder, and I'm a member of the steering committee of the Asian Network for the Philosophy of the Social Sciences. Another member of the steering committee is Kei Yoshida, a Japanese scholar. He's professor at Waseda University in Tokyo, and he did his PhD under Ian Jarvie supervision in Toronto. He's a Popperian and strongly interested in Popper. And another member of the steering committee is Professor Chang from Hong Kong, who is interested both in Hayek and Popper. And then Paul Dumichel, who was based in Japan, now just retired, is also a member of the steering committee, and I would say he's also quite he knows Popper quite well. He's not a Popperian, but he knows Popper quite well. Of course, there is less interest in Popper today in Asia because of the strong influence of the analytic philosophy. So young PhD students, it's almost impossible to find PhD students who are working on Popper. I push my students reading Popper, and I'm trying to do my best to spread Popper ideas in China, but it's not easy because there's not strong interest right now in Popper.
Oh, thanks, Francesco. That's about as much as we. Well, that's not a bad situation in your association. That's very good. It's not that we want rabid Popper people. We just want Popper's ideas to get a hearing.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Tim, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I was just going to follow up on this this idea about there's been some discussion about nationalism. I'm sure that we're all agreed that we don't want to see any form of ethnic nationalism resurgence of, but there is also civic nationalism, and just in a European context, you know, I'm sure Popper would be aghast at the current situation in Europe with the European war and basically a liberal democracy under attack from Russia. And that country, Ukraine, is asserting its national identity. Do we think that Popper would consider all forms of nationalism to be wrong? Britain, where I'm from, I would regard Britain to be a leading open society. Yet some would consider that, you know, our breaking away from the European Union is a sign of being less open. I don't think it is. I don't think that is really the meaning of the open society, and that you can have an open society and support civic nationalism. What do people think about that?
Well, I think you make a very clear distinction between the toxic forms of nationalism and what Britain was trying to do with Brexit, because the European Union has got a very undemocratic structure and very, very strong centralised regulatory authorities. And I think that's not the kind of internationalism that Popper would want. I think he'd be much more in favour of a decentralised collection of countries that are open inside themselves, never mind without taking instructions from some other body overseas, might have Britain's interests at heart.
I think that Popper would recognise the importance of traditions, and for example, in our country, we have a certain traditions of common law, and our political system is something that Popper would recognise as a good one, whereby first past the post ensures that you know, you can get rid of the government which has a very clear agenda which is put through to the people and it can be got rid of. It doesn't have to make a compromise all the time with in a coalition, as happens in other European countries. And what do people think about that? That in fact that the British system, political system, is actually more in line with the Popperian worldview because it allows rejection of bad theories about how to run our country. You know? I mean, that's probably quite controversial for some people. I know.
I'll just quickly say that if people do want to respond, just so that people can respond, we can respond to them in order. At the bottom, there's a reactions button, and you can actually raise your hand like what you see that John has done. So if we do want to have a response, like we can raise our hands and then we can hit those hands in order. John, did you want to say something?
Yes, I'd like to speak as both in America and somebody who's been living in Austria, in Europe for about 28 years. I think Rafe is right. There's a certain lack of transparency in the EU, and many things that need to be reformed. However, the fact that the EU does require certain basic levels, let's say, of workers' rights and of environmental standards and such, it leads to a situation where it's not possible for multinationals to play one European country against the other. Because, I mean, I know this because my girlfriend works for a law firm. Whenever a big multinational American company comes to Austria and they start looking at Austrian labor laws, they say, "Oh my God, what do you mean I can't fire people spontaneously? What do you mean people have all these rights to participate in the overseeing the company? What do you mean people have these rights to 5 weeks of paid vacation, et cetera, et cetera?" And there's a similar situation in all European countries. So that's the upshot of this is that if a company wants to do business in Europe, they have to do it in the terms that are favorable to the employees, which I personally see as an advance. With regard to Brexit, because Tim mentioned Brexit and how horrible it is in Russia and the war with Russia and all, the Brexit was one of the on the top list of the Russian agenda to try and break Europe up. A goal that Putin shared with the former American president. And I would say the long-term goal is to weaken Europe. And I don't want to get too deeply into the whole Brexit thing because there's many reasons why people were in favor of Brexit. I'll just say to the one past the post thing, I was just recently reading something by Popper where he did favor the one past the post system, and for those very reasons that Tim has just said. However, America's also got one past the post thing, the two-party system, so to say. And the problem is what happens when the billionaire class buys both parties. Then our rulers are not really the people that are in government, but the people paying for them, the people that the politicians in fact work for, which are billionaire funded super PACs and everything else. Those are the real rulers who are using the politicians as puppets in the United States at the moment. So I don't think one past the post is any kind of guarantee. But yes, the European Union must become much more transparent, and must much more vigorously protect its external borders, and not rely on Italy and Greece to take up all the burden of whatever migrant crisis goes on.
I've got a question for you, John. What do you think is the solution when speaking about American politics? When you say what happens when the billionaires buy both parties, do you think that it's a solution in the political philosophy and the traditions itself, or how can we solve that problem?
Piecemeal social engineering.
Yes, good answer. A+.
A great example. Just as I was switching between the computer and the phone, I just saw a headline. In fact, it's very interesting you said that there's a strong bipartisan initiative now to prevent U.S. representatives and senators from doing any kind of private stock trading. I just read that just now. That would be an interesting piece, yeah? And apparently there's Republican and Democratic support of it. We'll see how long that support lasts, who knows, things like the Koch brothers and the Mercers and all kinds of people pulling the strings behind the scenes might be able to squash it, yeah? I mean, there was also a lot of, as far as the rank and file are concerned, there was a lot of desire on the part of a lot of Americans, both Republican and Democrat, to write laws against the buying of elections by because there was this Supreme Court ruling in 2010 of Citizens United which allows unlimited contributions to political campaigns that are anonymous, and of course conservatives are just as up in arms about that as people on the right. However, every version of any bill that came up, was squashed because the people who buy the politicians, it's like a self maintaining situation. It's like once you get politicians in power who owe their allegiance to the system that brought them in there, it's really hard to get them out, right? Because it's like, oh, well, the billionaires put me here. I'm not going to try and stop the billionaires from funding elections because, and that bill was squashed. So hopefully this one won't be squashed. Yeah. We'll see what happens.
Interesting. Steve,
It's like what
did
the
you want
people
to add?
want and what the people want when it actually gets.
Actually elected person who works the system and knows many people at various levels of American government. It's not as simple as having money. There's lots of people with money who will never get elected because they don't know what the hell they're doing to get elected. There's a skill set involved. And one of the problems really isn't advertising or manipulating the public with some sort of billionaire message. I mean, you got to have a reason for people to vote for you. And you can get people, and I'll go reverse this back to more of a things Popper. I built a coalition that spanned everything from the NAACP to the Tea Party on an issue that concerned people here opposing a toll bridge. Everybody did not wish to pay for this bridge via tolls for their own particular reason. The NAACP having more concern for people with less money, felt this was a very regressive way to pay for the bridge. And the Tea Party thought that tolls were taxes and were, completely opposed. They hated it for whatever reason. You can build a consensus that we won. Biden with his infrastructure bill, now the federal government's going to pay for the whole damn thing. With money we don't have, by the way. We'll just print more of it. But to get elected, you have to communicate with factions that have a concern and speak to them. Now, if you have no money at all, good luck. But having money itself is not a requirement to actually effectively control politics. I'll tell you the one thing that I see and concerns me the most with the discovery of all the political interference at Twitter is if you can't build a way to get your ideas out there to try to create your coalitions because somebody is controlling the use an old expression, the horizontal and the vertical, and you'll either be diminished in terms of how many people see you, or you are banned and cannot even communicate with the public. It becomes very problematic. But as for the guys who get in and seem to be professional politicians, you can get them to jump to a different drummer if you can build a coalition of people inside of a democracy. They will respond to angry voters, no matter what a billionaire or some funder thinks, because self-preservation is part of one of the names of the game. They will respond. That's the idea of a democracy. But you have to get people organized, and you have to have a medium with which to do it. And if they're stacking the odds against you, you can't communicate your side of the argument. I was fighting I ended up fighting and winning against 4 governors, 2 senators, one of which is Mitch McConnell. He hated because he agreed to a toll bridge in Louisville. How can we in Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky have to not pay tolls? I showed him. I beat a sitting governor here in Kentucky of my own party because he crossed me. You can do these things. It's not just money. But you have to communicate and reach out and have a medium with which to do it.
So it's a combination of money and communication, and not exclusive of one of each, but it's the combination of both that you need.
Right. The power structure in this area wanted the toll bridge. I'm sorry, they didn't win. You can stand up to these power structures, but you have to have a way to build your coalition.
John, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, let me unmute. I think maybe I expressed myself improperly. It's not. I don't think that. I think people are not necessarily like a one-to-one going to jump on board just because there's so much money in the negative ads against certain participants. But there's a certain, like, for example, what's often used is these safe districts. Let's say there's for example, could be a safe, mostly a safe Republican district. Let's say a red district, where they know the person. Nobody is going to vote for a Democrat. Let's say, for example, in that district, and there's a Republican there who's like willing to compromise with Democrats. Let's say someone who's capable of rational thought, and what happens is when the money comes in, it's like they and this is what the Tea Party did. They primary the hell out of that district, and they put somebody like like a Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz or somebody like that, somebody who's going to come of the so-called Freedom Caucus, who is just going to more or less completely refuse to go along with anything. It's kind of a sabotage, so to say. It's sort of, let's make sure that as long as there's one single Republican that makes up the majority, nothing will pass. And that's what happened during the Obama years to a certain extent. We could talk about whether that was a good thing or a bad thing on many levels, but that's what I mean when the Koch brothers get in on a campaign. They're able to strategically put people in there that, I mean, the candidates themselves are not rich. It's just that they are, sort of bred as the spokesperson for a particular interest. Unfortunately, in the middle of what Frank, no, not Frank.
Well, I answered to either, but
Steve was saying, I'm in the middle of it. My screen froze. I missed the middle about you stopped the bridge from being built on the basis of tolls. Is that what happened?
Right. We killed it. I beat 4 governors, Mitch McConnell, the both chambers of commerce of Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky, the local paper. You get the peasants mad enough with their pitchforks, everybody else will back down.
Well, good for you. But then the federal government is paying for it. Why does it upset you that the federal government's paying for it?
Don't have, but if they're going to throw trillions of dollars around, well, we might as well grab some of it too. Which again is part of the Democratic problem. If there's no discipline on money being spent by the government, at least the cities and states in this country have to balance their budgets at the end of the year. But to go back to another point I was going to make, and I've often made it with people who live in parliamentary democracies, is, and I guess this is where I think your criticism might be a little off base about what the Tea Party did or didn't do, is that if you really thought about it, if the United States was a parliamentary democracy, there's probably at least 5 to 7 political parties trying to exist inside of 2. And the quote unquote, what people will call rhinos or the country club Republicans, the wealthy plutocrats, well, they've kind of moved over to the Democrat Party for the most part, and are not as effective as they used to be within the Republican Party. Why coalitions shift, I don't know, but they do. There is movement. As for the relative success of the Tea Party, I mean, look, I live in Kentucky, so we have 2 senators, as all states do. One is, Mr. Central Establishment Republican Mitch McConnell, and the other is Mr. Libertarian Rand Paul. And you can disagree with both of them, but this same state elects both because there's flavors within the party of both, and they fight for control. The country club would love to beat our local congressman, Thomas Matthews, more of a libertarian. I watch this in Ohio politics. There's various flavors. The rural counties, like there was a gentleman here from China says, well, the rural counties vote a certain way, the cities another. I live in Covington, Kentucky, which is an extremely liberal city and very tolerant by even East and West Coast standards. Whereas other parts of the state, you know, the lady that made all the news here in Kentucky because she wouldn't agree to register the marriages of gay couples was a Democrat. You know, these parties change over time. You know, some of the most, you know, there's very odd situations. And when I was a young man, everybody in the state was a Democrat because that's the only way you could get elected, but they fought everything in primaries. Now today it's kind of gone the other way. I don't know. But if this was a parliamentary democracy and you did the first past the post, there would be at least 5 to 7 parties running.
Yeah. So there's no cut and dry lines down the middle of everyone's kind of mixed.
Towards the end.
Yeah.
But Mitch McConnell was pretty good at blocking things as well, wasn't he? I mean,
well, it's easier to block something than to build a coalition for something, I have found.
Yeah.
Tim, you've got your hand raised.
Popper, obviously, he wrote that famous article about the nature of democracy and rejecting the idea that it's not a question of who should rule, is how do you get rid of your rulers. And, you know, it seems to me that, you know, there's been discussion about sort of elections being bought and this sort of thing, but as long as people have a choice to get rid of the incumbent government, isn't that the main thing? I mean, you know, it doesn't guarantee that you'll have honest, good government. And the idea that, you know, isn't having to form coalitions.
If you don't storm the Capitol, maybe.
Yeah, well, but I mean, particularly just as somebody from Europe, I mean, looking at America, it does seem to be a country that really has a problem with tribalism in the negative sense that Popper would recognize that instead of having a genuine democratic conversation where you, as you say, that maybe you're right, maybe I'm wrong, that in the political world, that's just gone from American politics. It's just completely tribal. It's completely us and them. It's almost like two nations in the same geographical border fighting. Is that a fair characterization? Wouldn't it be better to try and move towards more a friendly a politics which is more in line with normal democratic processes, where there wasn't this gaping gap between the political parties? And isn't it better to have large coalitions, because if you have lots of different small parties all saying slightly different things, you know, that's not a good recipe for government, I don't think. Having to compromise and support a party which is in some ways is not what you think, but it's better that you think that they're better than the opposition. Isn't that a Popperian way of looking at politics? It's what people think.
Yeah, Ken, you wanted to say something?
Maybe Steve wants to say something.
Yes. I want to cite Popper Scott, and there can be no human society without conflict. Such a society would be a society not of friends but of ants.
Yeah, so it's good to have disagreement, and it's good to have people because if we all agreed, then we wouldn't make any progress. I think that's what. Yeah. Did anyone else want to? John?
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, sure. You have to have disagreement, but you have to have rational discussion, and that seems to be what's missing, particularly in the U.S. Yeah, it's like a zero-sum game kind of thing. Yeah? I'm going to stop your president from doing anything, so that our president gets in. You know, so let's make sure that this president is completely ineffective. Let's make sure the next president is completely ineffective. Let's make sure that, you know what I mean? It's sort of it's an institutional malfunction, in my view. to a large extent. And it would be good to have a conversation on what sort of things might be changed by piecemeal social engineering to improve the situation. Yeah?
I think it might also have to do with Plato's influence with putting as the main problem of politics who should rule. Because if that question's asked, who should rule, then we answer. We have to answer. But if we change the question completely to how can we detect and eliminate error, then we're not saying which team we're on and whether my team should rule or your team should rule. We're looking for error, whichever team is in place, whether it's like Republican or Democratic or whoever it is, constantly looking for error. And I think maybe it's that switch in what the main question of politics should be asking. Maybe it's a traditional or educational switch that needs to happen, which would then change the institution, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the example of the last president, there were Republicans who had more backbone, and like Kinzinger and Cheney and all, who realized this guy was especially the way he went out of office, the January 6th stuff. Yeah, I mean that he revealed his true colors in a way. Unfortunately, they ended up both losing their seats. So there's something on the base. There is this urge for the authoritarian leader who knows everything, who is anointed by God, who can't fail and is going to, it's also amongst very, very fundamentalist evangelicals, especially. That if you look at, there's a great site you can look at on the internet called Uncivil Religion, which documents what was going on amongst the crowds on January 6th, and you see all kinds of things like Trump has been put in by God, Trump is king, Jesus wants God to be president, and stuff like that. And there was a guy even like carrying a cross, a full-size cross, up the stairs of the Congress. There was a lot of very irrational authoritarian dogma going on in the minds of these people. And I think some of the rhinos sort of as some of the Tea Party people would call them, or were just taken aback by it. Yeah, but unfortunately, many of them just lost their seats. Yeah, so we end up with either completely MAGA or the Democrats. Yeah, and some of the Democrats, of course, are also nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's that strain where we kind of long for an authority to tell us what to do and to take our responsibility off our shoulders, and they make all the decisions for us. So we look for an authority. Rafe, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I think we might get back to Popperism, and I think more than eliminating error, it's about organising institutions which control the abuse of power. It's essentially humanistic politics is about controlling power in all its forms: physical, emotional, ideological. And I think that's where Popper's non-authoritarian theory of knowledge is so important, his theory of tolerance. And it's about designing institutions, as he said, and David Hume said, so that even bad rulers can do the least amount of damage. And
checks and balances.
Politics in our time has been to massively centralise power in Commonwealth or national governments, and I think that's a very toxic development. The other thing is that so many things depend on politics, as though every issue, every disagreement ends up becoming a political issue rather than just something that can be worked out. Like the toll bridge at a local level, some political party, now the feds have picked up the tab. Well, that's just taken autonomy away from that local community. And that's what happens when the central power prevails. It just walks right over the top of the local interests in Kentucky and Cincinnati. And that's what Popper was concerned about when he was talking about institutional controls of power, rather than deciding who's going to be the top dog.
Not letting anyone have too much power.
Precisely.
John? I'll unmute you. Hang on one sec.
Sorry.
Yeah, I unmuted you. It's okay.
Sure. I'm just going to ask Steve if he thinks that and unfortunately, it did freeze when he was talking, but does he think that that free bridge was necessary? I mean, the bridge itself, not regardless of the question of who was to pay for it.
That was a very interesting question, and I researched this beyond probably. And here's one of the issues that you'll also get into in government, if you actually ever are unfortunate enough to be elected into something, is you will often have to make decisions about areas that are not your area of expertise, and you have to rely on other people. Other times you can do a lot of digging yourself to figure things out. And this area made a decision years ago to save money and be cheap. We have 3 interstate highways that come through this area. It's a huge distribution area because about 2/3 of the population of the United States lives within 600 miles of here, even though what's here isn't necessarily the reason why the world revolves. It's just a good, you draw a compass, circle around where Cincinnati is 600 miles and you've got a lot of folks. So there's 3 interstates, and they decided years ago to save money to take those over one bridge. The correct answer was to build a bypass around the city so the through traffic didn't jam up our one bridge during rush hour, and we would have more land to develop. But I couldn't get the city of Cincinnati, they did not wish to be bypassed, and the moneyed interest there, the utility company and some of the folks were going to get big bucks for selling their worthless bottom land on the river to collect. And I had to keep fighting them. And you can. The city of Covington, we're the smaller, we're like I will say to folks that try to understand the dynamic here, we're the Brooklyn to Cincinnati's Manhattan. Both are smaller, mind you. We have 400,000 people on our side of the river, and they've got, several million, but we're still pretty, important in the scheme of things. And they did not want to listen to our interests over here, which were, we'd like to develop more land outside of town, which again creates interest. There's people who are against all bridges, period, because they don't want anybody driving cars. Everything should be mass transit, and that's that. There are odd coalitions of groups of people, and everybody needs to be heard, but somebody needed to win on the deal. What I managed to get done was they shrunk the bridge so that they didn't clear out our most affordable housing. I mean, where are they going to build bridges? Over the poor people? They're not putting the interstate through the wealthy neighborhood. They were going to get rid of all of our green space. So I did not want the bridge at all. I wanted a different solution. I just made it the least worse it could be. No tolls and smaller. But I couldn't stop all of Cincinnati's business interests from getting, their sine non qua. And I think that's often what happens in politics. The maximalist positions rarely hold sway. I'll go like for example, the Supreme Court on abortion. Okay, after all these years of getting Supreme Court justices, we get a ruling that says Roe v. Wade is no more. Okay, now it's back to each of the states. Guess what? Even in the most conservative states, you're not passing anti-abortion laws. Okay, one group finally won their way, but it didn't mean things changed. Certain consensuses evolve over time. Now, when Roe v. Wade started, you would not have had the majority of people electing for abortion. I just watched some old 60s police show. For whatever reason, I was channel surfing, and the whole thing was about how evil an abortion was. Adam 12, stop it. This lady was being kidnapped to go to another state for an abortion. Oh, horrible. Well, today everybody uses that as a boogeyman, but I haven't seen a single state enforce what the Supreme Court said they could. Opinion evolves over time, and consensus eventually evolves, but probably after a lot of fussing and fighting, and in ways maybe people find objectionable. The thing I find most objectionable is what I was trying to relate to that we found out with Elon Musk and Twitter, was that that when the government puts their thumb on what it is you're able to hear or see, then it's not a level playing field with trying to win your side of an argument or shape your side of the compromise. I think we get this, unless the reverse this back to things Popper. We're trying to figure out, well, how do we make people more converted to his way of thinking? Not exactly what the results are, just the methods. And you go, if all the academic institutions are only going to hire analytic philosophers and put their thumb on the scale, it's hard to get Popper's message out. You have to find other ways to do it. Because I'm not at all convinced. So I'm a major donor to universities. I'm giving away millions to a couple of universities, but not to the philosophy department. I don't want to promote, Frankfurt School thinking. I've given up on those folks. I think if the reason here that we're here is to make Popper more approachable for more people, we're going to have to do it outside the academic setting. And as far as the cult thing, I think, which was the call to arms of this meeting, I think whenever you're an extreme minority, like, 1 out of 100, people are going to say you're a cult because how you kooks think differently. How do you more mainstream this way of thinking or Popper's way of looking at stuff? And I think there may be some historical reasons why Popper didn't catch on as big as he should have. But that doesn't mean that we in our generation can't do things to make, in the battle for ideas, to get him more out into the mainstream. And it would help society, whether we agree on a political issue or not, to have this way of thinking be more current. Because I see things getting more, as you do, more intolerant. Not that I don't see tolerance building in this world.
Yeah, completely agree. Kane, do you mind if I come back to you just quickly? Because we've just had 2 new people join us, and I just want to give them a chance to introduce themselves, and then I can come back to your comment or question, if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So Ray, I noticed you jumped in. Did you want to quickly jump on and introduce yourself? Let us know where you're from, what you do, how you came across Popper, what your favorite book is.
Oh my goodness. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, my goodness, those are big questions, aren't they? I'm a theoretical biologist, and I write on subjects such as evolution, but in particular, I consider questions of the biological basis of free will. And I'm currently writing a book with my brother Dennis on this matter. My introduction to Popper was back in the 1960s when I was my late teens. And at that time, I was exploring my own political feelings and attitudes and so on, and coming at it from a left-wing perspective, but not being a Marxist. And I came upon Popper's Open Society and Its Enemies and was extraordinarily impressed by it. It kind of encapsulated everything that I thought at that time and my doubts about society. I found the Marxist view rather depressing in the sense that it seemed to remove agency from humanity. My own political approach and my approach in science was to actually put agency back center stage, that we as organisms, as humans and organisms in general, have agency in the ecosystem and in the world in which we live. And I've therefore been very much concerned with the gene centricity that took hold in the 1960s and 70s and has remained and held a grip, the reductionist approach to gene center. And this goes to this question: why is it that science has been so, at times, almost antagonistic to Popper's ideas in relation to scientific methodology and so on? And I think that this is one of the reasons for it, which is that science, reductionism, and gene centricity, the idea of blueprints of life, the codes that somehow or other we were not masters of our destiny gained hold. This. And I think that is central to this question of why it is that Popper went out of favor. Popper himself, incidentally, contributed to the debate about gene centricity and agency of humans in particular. And it's something that's influenced my thinking over the years. So I'm sorry that was rather a long-winded answer to your question, but I think that yes, we do need to get Popper into the popular domain. He is relevant to much that is, I think, going wrong with political debate and philosophy in current times, where people just simply entrench that there is somehow a truth. And the curious thing is that people now talk of my truth, their truth, whose truth. It's all kind of very entrenched in position, rather than looking at ways in which one can find objective approaches to knowledge and understanding. And I think we need to get back to that idea that what science does, what scholarship does, is to seek an understanding, not necessarily a truth. Anyway, that's my answer to your question. I'm sorry, but
No, perfect.
I'm not visual at the moment, but later on I hope to be.
No worries. Thank you for sharing. Do you have a favorite book? It's a hard question. But...
Of Popper's, you mean?
Yes, yes.
My favorite was simply because it was my very first one that I read was Open Society and Its Enemies. I mean, it did have such a profound impact on me, and I often go back to it and read sections of it. It spoke for me, you see, at that time. I remained left-wing, incidentally. I'm not a socialist, but I'm quite left-wing in my approach to society. I believe that, there are social problems that require social solutions. There are issues that require social solutions. We are social beings, after all, and Popper would have understood that. But what doesn't come out of that is that simply because we are social beings, that there are particular scientific methodologies, if you like, that will understand the way in which society moves. I hated the idea that philosophers have merely interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. And I think Popper was right in analyzing that in relation to the fact that, that somehow or other we needed to understand how it changes, and that we could only ameliorate, if you like, the impact of the changes that in any event will occur, regardless of what you and I think or do. Ideas matter. They matter enormously. So I think Open Society and Its Enemies, I think, is my favorite book because it puts ideas back, and it puts it back in a way that still holds on to the idea that there is some kind of, at least an objective understanding, not necessarily an objective knowledge as such, but certainly an objective understanding that that is based on some kind of reasoning.
That we can have an impact, and we can have an influence on our society.
We can have an influence on society. We can have an influence on ecology. We can address the very, he made the most extraordinarily important point, which is that life is problem solving. That is where problems come from. The only reason why there are problems is because there's a challenge to life, to the sustainability of life. And what life does is address those problems. It addresses it in various ways, through physiology, through anatomy, through evolution, it addresses and finds solutions to those kinds of problems. And at a social level, it finds social ways of addressing those issues, cultural ways of addressing those issues. We can do this. And the pessimistic view that somehow or other society has some sort of essentialistic process by which it changes, and the only way we can really understand society is understand that process. The history of all hitherto existing society is one of class struggle. I mean, how depressing is that? Yes, of course, that doesn't mean that one rejects the fact that class played a huge influence in the life of humanity. It does. When my father was alive, he was born in Victorian times, incidentally, and when he was alive, you know, you were born into the class you existed in, and it was damn difficult to get out of that class. The structure was there. So people growing up in that period, of course, they saw things in relation to class and to class struggle. There was a struggle, and the only way to get through that struggle was to unite and come together to address those issues. But it's not the only and the sole process of change in society. There are many other kinds of things. I mean, the idea, how do we deal with an aging population? How do we deal with increasing levels of dementia and so on? These are social issues that we have ideas about. They can be addressed in relation to primary care. They can be addressed in a whole variety of ways that may be different now to how we would have addressed them 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and so on, as we better understand the nature of the problems that we face. Problems change. I liken the problem to a kind of a jigsaw puzzle where the picture is changing all the time. You're trying to put the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together, but there's no particular picture, because the very process of addressing the jigsaw puzzle, the very process of selecting bits that go into place or fit into place to solve the jigsaw puzzle changes the picture. That's the engagement that we have. It's one of the reasons why I think that Popper was, as it were, a little skeptical about sociology. The very process of being a sociologist also changes the issue that you're addressing. It doesn't remain static, because, you know, there's no hill upon which you can stand and sit and watch and observe and then understand the social change or the social problem, because you're engaged in that social problem, and the very engagement changes the nature of it. So life is always considering a jigsaw puzzle that is continually changing, and it's continually changing because that's what life does. In solving problems, it changes. Change is all around us all the time. It's not, there's nothing fundamentally corrupt about change. We don't want to hold things constant. Life doesn't do that. Life seeks to change it.
Yeah, so when solving problems, we create new problems. So
exactly.
Yeah. John, you have your hand raised.
I just wanted to ask Ray two brief questions, since he's so interested in the open society and all, and he's interested in the theory of mind. What do you think about Popper's treatment of Marx in the open society, and why is he doing what he's doing? And secondly, what do you think of his book, The Self and Its Brain, as far as you know, and Daniel Dennett's, perhaps if you have looked into it, Daniel Dennett's objections to it?
No, that's a very big question. My thought about the issue of Marx and in relation to open society and its enemies, to be honest, I think there's a certain degree of unfairness to Karl Marx. In you know, what he's addressing there is Marxism, and I'm not so convinced myself that Marx was beyond understanding that society doesn't actually change in such a rigid way. You know, once others gain hold of a particular idea and transform it into a movement and and so on. So I don't know whether that answers your question about Karl Popper and Marx. It's possibly a little unfair. I mean, Karl Marx looked at the United States, for example, and saw a society that might be changeable without revolution. I mean, the fact that, of course, it did have a revolution, but of a different kind than the simplistic capitalist versus working class revolution. He wasn't averse to seeing that democracy could work. In my view, although I'm not the best advocate for Marx, because I'm not a Marxist. So that, if that answers the question about Popper's attitude, but I think Popper got it right in the sense of Marxism. I came upon it, you see, when I was 16 years old, and I was looking at I went along to different kinds of, I went along to the Communist Party and sat in on meetings of the Communist Party, my local Communist Party. Such was my desire to understand what was going on and what they were thinking and so on. And it was interesting, actually, because they kind of turned to, whenever they were addressing an issue, they would turn to a kind of a guru at their meeting who would give the Marxist interpretation. And yeah, I mean, honestly, I was shocked by, well, you know, I mean, I was 16 years old and I was pretty naive in those days. I mean, I left school at 15. I had no qualifications. I had no idea about any of this, really. And I just knew I was interested in politics and so on. And I started going to various meetings. And I was also shocked sometimes by what I saw in the approach that you were kind of being marshaled, if you like. I hate being marshaled. I used to go on demonstrations against the Vietnam War. The one thing I really hated was people shouting at me through a megaphone, and that I was expected to chant in unison something, you see. You know, ho, ho, Ho Chi Minh, ho, ho, Ho Chi Minh. I wouldn't want to do that. I'm me, Ray Noble. I think in a particular kind of way.
Carrying pictures of Chairman Mao.
Yes, I used exactly. Well, people were waving their red books. I mean, people, and indeed, at those marches, people would be waving their little red books and so on. Well, that was not the reason why I was on the march. I wasn't on the march in order to create a closed society of order and so on, regardless of how good it might seem to people that everybody would be equal and so on. What is the nature of equality? And how do we achieve it? Were questions that I was interested in. And I wasn't interested in megaphone politics. Never been interested in megaphone, but I hate being shouted at. I hate being marshaled. I'm a free spirit.
This sounds very much like Karl Popper's early experiences in the Hölgasse. Right?
Well, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. The only thing I can say is that thanks to very many people who were willing to put their lives on the line, I did grow up in a society where I could say what I thought. I've met many people in my life who aren't in that position. When I became a student, I went to University of Manchester and studied zoology. I met somebody on a train going up who was also a student ready to start a master's course in university. He was from Greece. And at that time, there had been a coup in Greece. And the only reason why he spoke to me then onwards and became friends with me is because he knew that it was by chance that we met on a train. He lived a life when he was a student. He lived those 3 years of his life as a student with great caution as who he spoke to, particularly about politics. And he went back to Greece. And when he went back to Greece, he sent me a postcard saying that he'd joined the army, which was a great surprise to me. And he said to me, the reason why I've done this is because I want to be the one with a gun. I don't want to live in that.
He trusted you because he knew that you were not some agent or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my view, you see, I found Karl Popper extraordinarily liberating, objective knowledge. Now it gets back to this question of the self-induced brain. I have a lot of issues with the self-induced brain as a biologist. But I don't dismiss it out of hand. I think that they were struggling to find a way of addressing the question of how, in a material world, can you get ideas being influential on that material world? Where are these? Where and how do ideas work?
The hard problem
in the machinery and stuff. So if things are machinery, if the world is material, then how on earth can you get ideas that have an impact, which is non-material, the non-materiality of ideas? So I was certainly impressed by their attempt to address that issue, and it's an issue that, along with my brother, that I've been addressing as well, and I think the answer lies in the very process of physiology itself, and the way in which ideas are generated, and act socially, that organisms act socially, and with language and with communication, and with all sorts of processes that mean that we can act in ways that influence the world about us. But
So do you consider yourself a physicalist?
and well, I wouldn't like to adopt that. I'm
not a behaviorist.
I'm a materialist in the sense, I suppose, that I don't think that there is a spiritual world that exists apart from me, but I'm not averse to the idea. When I look at physics, I see very, very strange things happening in relation to things like entanglement and so on. And when you look at the strange things that occur, like, for example, the murmurations of starlings, you know, the way in which starlings can instantaneously work as a group in extraordinary ways, taking on form and shape in ways that clearly something is coordinating. There is some process by which that is somehow coordinated. And as a biologist, I'm fascinated by that. I don't know the answer to it, but I'm nonetheless fascinated.
There's also beauty and mystery in the laws of physics.
Yes, absolutely. More so. I mean, the more you look, the less likely you are to come to the conclusion that you really understand what's going on here. I don't say that in a way of despairing either. I say that in a way of thinking that, well, you know, look, there's a hell of a lot out there that we can be excited about, that we can really.
I think it was Popper that said, the more we know we don't know.
Exactly, like that.
Kane, you had your hand raised. I just want to.
Infinicy of our ignorance.
Yes. Kane, you had a question?
Yes, my questions are simple. May I ask Mr. Frank? I wonder. You said moral hazard and the evaluation of liberal arts. How is your initiative to this problem? And I also ask Mr. He's out. Mr. Lane over. He's in. My mistake. I like your lovely British accent, and as a left wing, how do you think about Britain former Prime Minister Tony Blair's third way? Yes, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, so we have one question first for Frank, for Steve, sorry.
And I'm not sure I completely understand the question. Could you repeat it?
You criticized moral hazard and the evaluation of liberal arts in American university. I understand that.
Yeah. There's too much groupthink on campus today. It's almost, I mean, comedians in the United States won't even go on campus because of all the political correctness. You can't say anything. Cancel culture has gotten to be pathetic. A local comedian who's known globally, lives just up the way, Dave Chappelle, probably one of the best known guys, is large enough that he got away from the attempt to cancel him. But it's hard to have an unpopular opinion on campus today. It reminds me perhaps of what I would have imagined it to be like during the Red Guards era, where they would be looking, you know, or to use the Spanish Inquisition. We'll find the heresy, and we're going to be active in scrutinizing you and making sure that you don't have any strange thoughts. What is the antithesis of what is Popper? I mean, you need to have free dialogue to be able to find out what you know and what you don't know, and maybe find out amazingly that you may have agreements you didn't think you had with someone else that might have other ideas about other things. But the environment to exchange free ideas and to study on campus, I find, is for a large part is gone. The money that I'm donating now to universities is for first generation students coming up from poverty so that they can complete degrees, primarily in a college of what's called informatics, which is something that I understood because of my son's education, not because of mine, where the theory is that almost all degrees today involve the use of technology, whether it's law, medicine, accounting, you name it, journalism. And so they attempt to inculcate higher levels of computer skills in all the different disciplines. And I thought, well, that's practical. And because our local university is not of international repute, most of the younger students that go there tend to stay in our community, which helps lift up the community. My son, what I find is when people go further away from the university, they tend not to come back to the little backwater towns like Cincinnati and Covington, Kentucky. Or my son went to RIT and to Carnegie Mellon and now is in Washington, D.C., and he will not come back here. And I don't blame him. I mean, it's a nice town. I love that we are here. My family's been from this town for 6 generations, since before our Civil War. But when I look and see what has gone on the campuses, and I guess to some degree in politics, because there's a certain, I think John was talking about this, ideological purity drives within parties. It does not allow the free flow of ideas, and yeah, it can get a little Stalinist at times. But you have to have a way to express yourself, and I don't see it being done well on campus. So my theory is, if you want to spread tolerance and the ability for people to think critically and rationally, which I think Karl Popper does a lot to expand upon, we're not going to get a fair hearing on campus, and it's got to be spread through alternative ways in media, whether it's just simply things like this little, strangers finding each other somehow online, or through a more dedicated program of trying to build bridges to the wider community.
Yeah, it's no surprise that Plato is the father of our high schools and universities. So, and then they're so authoritarian. John, did you have a quick question? Then we can go back to Kane's question for Ray.
I just wanted to
okay. There's some net problem on it.
I just wanted to both agree and disagree with Steve. I agree that there's a huge problem at universities and there's a huge problem with wokeness. My disagreement is that I'm not ready to give up academia. I mean, I'm in it, and I think you just have to. I mean, I'm in a position where I get woke attacks as well from students, but I just give it back to them in 100 different ways. I mean,
well, and I'm glad you're there and can do that. I'm not in academia, never have been, other than my studies, and a bit of an autodidact. I'd rather read at the library or find things on my own. But I just find that you've got a very big uphill battle.
Yeah, it's an institutional thing. I mean, I think the directors of universities have to stick by their professors. The professors have to have the guts to combat it. And the directors of the universities have to back up their professors and say, but that's obviously not been happening. I don't know why the institutions and universities are so afraid of these hysterical, emotional hemophiliacs that are going around. I don't know why, but I mean, I had one student was like taking everything I said out of context. I just made a joke out of it, you know. I said, "Thank you for the wonderful illustration of how the Twitter mob works." Yeah, you see how that worked? He took what I said out of context, and then you expanded on it. Wasn't that a ridiculous crap? Wasn't that ridiculous? Let's take everything out of context. Why don't we? I made a joke out of it, you know. Because that's what they do. They take one little thing out of context and they say, "Oh, you must be saying this." Ha ha ha. It's like,
Well,
no, I'm not saying that.
What I appreciate most about what you just did, and I have used this effectively in politics, is ridicule. You make fun of people. And
oh yeah, absolutely. Very important.
Whoever has no clothes actually works. You know, when you can, you know, you just have to sometimes. I don't know. I guess I don't have enough tolerance to be putting up with that many intolerant people.
I'm planning to audit courses at our university and just be a troll. I don't know, because the relativism at the University of Vienna is like the official thing that people. I mean, like one of the main professors he says, "I am a card-carrying relativist." He's from the Edinburgh School of the sociology of scientific knowledge. Yeah, so. I just think you have to be able to just stand up and say, you know, actually, I think what you're saying is nonsense because of this and that and the other thing. Yeah.
I just want to say, sorry, Steve, did you want to say something, Steve?
No, it's just that the gentleman had a question addressed to another.
Yes.
person.
Yeah. So, I just wanted to say hi to Gabriel. I saw you came in. Hi. We'll come back to you just quickly. I just want to. Kane, you had another question for Ray? What was the second question that you had for Ray, Kane?
How do you think about the third wave of Tony Blair as left wing? Yeah.
I'm reluctant to give a viewpoint about Tony Blair in particular, because one takes politicians across the piece, not on whether or not you agree with any one particular issue or action. So, and I adopt that in relation to almost all politicians in a sense. I think that one of the problems with politics in the democracies at the moment is that we are seeking entrenched positions rather than seeking understanding of those positions. And this goes back to this question of universities too. One of the sad approaches, it seems to me, to education is to treat education as a technology, the technology of thought, if you like, the technology of our ideas. And what I mean by that is that there is universities are there in order to influence people. In other words, you understand behavior in order to change it, in order to use that understanding to change behavior. The early behaviorists, incidentally, thought that they wanted to understand animal behavior in order that they could manipulate it and change it. And that's true an awful lot of educationalism that developed out of that idea. I think it's an erroneous view of education. It's an erroneous view of universities. Now, one of the other things that's happened, I think, in universities, although I'm no expert because I retired some time ago as a permanent member of faculty, but, you know, in the old days, tenure of members of staff mattered in universities. And what that meant was that your position in a university was not dependent on the view that you held, that you could, to a reasonable degree, freely question and push the boundaries of scholarship and understanding. And one could do that in a way that was not restricted by a perceived set of opinions. So you could, I think if you went back 50 years, 60 years, perhaps, and you took the idea of gender, for example, you could, I imagine, have a debate in scholarship about the difficulties that there are inherent in deciding and defining what a gender is, what we mean by gender. Nowadays, what happens is that there is a shouting match, and that shouting match goes on within universities. So there is no longer a seeking to understand the problems inherent with gender. And for example, we need to understand the difficulties of defining gender in law. It is defined in law, in general respects, is defined that, you know, a woman is an adult female. That doesn't actually help very much when you're trying to consider what that actually means. But instead of addressing the nature of that problem, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, incidentally, by saying, well, we can't define it very easily, so therefore we throw the problem away, or we adopt a rigid position and say, well, in that case, I can adopt any position I want, because this is a social problem to be addressed, that we do need a way of addressing the problems that arise when people do not fit those particular categories. So if I go back to your question, I'm sorry, I've deviated from your question about Tony Blair. I think we have to get away from the idea that there are unique solutions. There are many solutions about which we should debate and argue and disagree. There's nothing wrong with disagreement. That's the essence of democracy, in a sense. We don't have a democracy that we only use occasionally. We use it all the time. We're doing it now while we're talking now, you see. I mean, I'm trying to express views as a biologist. I am dismayed by the simplicity of some biologists who join in the gender debate, for example, by saying, well, as a biologist, you know, gender is defined by chromosomes. Well, no, it isn't, because there's no way it could be defined by chromosomes. When you meet somebody in the street, you don't dissect them and look at their chromosomes before you address them. Or assume anything about them, and we make assumptions about people all the time. It's the way we anticipate behavior of others, after all. That's what we do. That's what all organisms do. And but we don't dissect them in order to find out what they're made of before we decide whether they are or are not a particular gender and so on. So the social problem is different from the biological problem. And it certainly doesn't necessarily find the answer in the biology. The biology alone is not sufficient to provide the answer. We need to get back to an understanding that scholarship requires an enormous degree of freedom of thought and a freedom of expression. And that dismays me, in a sense. I mean, I said earlier on that I tend to come at issues from a reasonably left-wing perspective, and that's largely because I tend to look at social solutions to what I regard as social problems, but not in a rigid kind of way. I don't believe that I know the way society should be structured in order to achieve the objectives of whatever. Now, going back to Tony Blair, therefore, I think also, you see, he has that kind of pragmatic view of politics as well. That doesn't necessarily fit easily in organizations like the Labour Party, who tend to want to find socialist solutions or whatever. I mean, I'm actually, I confess, a member of the Labour Party, but I'm not a socialist. I'm not a socialist. I never have been. Now, you know, if I were in the United States of America, I don't know precisely what I would be. I'd probably be a Democrat. I would find common ground with people as much as I could. And that means sometimes finding common ground with people on the right of politics. I find a lot of common ground on the right of with people on the right of politics in relation to libertarianism, for example, the importance of liberty and how liberty can be defended and needs to be enhanced and defended. But I would probably disagree with them on the basis of of how social solutions contribute to that kind of, we don't suddenly find ourselves in the middle of a jungle with freedom. We find ourselves in the middle of a society with freedom, and that those freedoms are predicated on the nature of that society. And we create that nature of society. And that's in a large sense where my kind of political viewpoint comes from. So the issues that I address is how best can we foster that freedom? Yeah. And we foster it in having a different view of universities. Universities are about scholarship. We need to free people to explore issues and ideas and understanding, whether that's to do with gender, whether it's to do with the problems associated with people who feel that they're in the wrong body, or whatever way one wants to express it. We need understanding. Our institutions, these great institutions, universities, should be providing that understanding, not engaging in the simplicities of entrenched positions.
Yeah, so it's about spreading that critical rationalism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So Gabriel, I wanted to open the floor to you and give you the chance to introduce yourself. Let us know what you do, where you're from, how you found Popper, what your favorite book is. I know that's a lot of questions at once, but
yeah, that is. Well,
oh yeah, you're back. Yeah.
Yeah, my Zoom app keeps bugging out. I don't know what's happening, but
that's fine.
Well, if anything happens, Luke is here to help me out, right? So, well, yeah, these are a lot of questions. So first of all, I'm from Brazil. I'm a biology student, so I recognize in Ray, a fellow biologist, and currently I am studying. I mean, I am an undergraduate in biology, but my aim is to follow an academic career in the philosophy of science. I really, I was very much influenced by Karl Popper, especially by the logic of scientific discovery. That was the first book that I read from him, and I read it 2 years ago, I think, in 2021. And
oh my god, sorry.
Oh.
I'll just put him on mute. That's fine. You can continue.
Okay. I organized a reading group to read The Logic of Scientific Discovery with some other friends that study biology, and it was a great experience. We really enjoyed the book in general. A lot of people ended up quitting. Not everyone finished the book. Some thought it was hard to understand. I had taken a course on logic before, so it was easier for me. But I was really touched by it, especially by its idea of criticism and of scientific truth, because before I read the book, I was a convict positivist. I thought I was very sure that science worked by having extremely probable theories. So an idea that is precisely criticized in the book, and reading it was kind of liberating. I realized at one point how wrong I were about all my conceptions of science, and by realizing it, I was like, well, I'm wrong about it all. So how does science work, even though I am completely wrong in how does it wrong. So how does it actually work? And the logic framework that Popper provides, the idea of falsifiability and so on, it was really extremely interesting for me. So not only in the sense that it provided me with a tool to see science with credibility, to see that science is, after all, something important, something that has something different to it in relation to other systems of belief or other methods of knowing the world. But besides that, it also touched me in a way that I started to see how important the idea of criticism was, and the idea of criticism and of freedom of thought. Before I read The Logic of Scientific Discovery, I was more I had not authoritarian views on politics, but I was certainly more authoritarian than after I read the book. After I read the book, I was extremely in favor of pluralism in the field of ideas. And well, to sum it up, it was really touching for me to read the book, and it influenced the way I interpret other things I read, other things I learned in university. It inspired me in taking other courses at university to learn more about other theories of how the world works. So in my university, we have this in my university, we can take courses on anything we like. So I am a biology student, but for instance, I took classes in philosophy, I took classes in mathematics, I took classes in psychology, I took classes in history, because I wanted to, and I have this freedom. And it was all very influenced by my reading of Karl Popper. I participated in last year's meet and greet, and it was extremely satisfying for me to know that there is a group of people that thinks that is following more or less the same line that I am following. And well, I think I have spoken too much about myself. And
that's fine. No, we appreciate you sharing that with us. John, I think he has a question.
Yeah, just briefly to hello, Gabriel. We met him last time. I was just wondering, since he was talking about the influence on him of the Logik der Forschung, the logic of scientific discovery, if he perhaps has gone on to the Open Society, what you might think of that book. Yeah.
So I also organized a reading group of the Open Society with a couple of friends of mine from very different backgrounds. One was a psychologist, one was a medic, one was a law student, and then there was me. Unfortunately, at some point, the group had to stop its reading because people have their problems, and because of very well, my friends at some point couldn't couldn't continue reading the book with me. We had to stop right before the end of the first part, and unfortunately, we all got caught on the very intense university. I don't know how to say it, but well, university is hard sometimes. It requires a lot of you. I started a project in the history of biology, and it has taken a lot of time from me. I haven't had the opportunity of finishing the book, very unfortunately, but well, what I was thinking of the book at the time I stopped right at the chapter about the philosopher king, and I was extremely interested because I was hearing an idea of politics that I had never heard before, of freedom, because here in Brazil, at least in the time now being, there is a great polarization between left and right. I hope you all have heard of the situation here. We barely did not re-elect a very clearly authoritarian leader, who is Bolsonaro. We barely managed to kick him out of presidency in favor of Lula, who is a leftist. It was a very close election. It was decided by the few percentage points after. It was an election like 50.6% voted for one candidate and 49.4 voted for the other. It was extremely close, and Bolsonaro was extremely close to winning. We managed to kick him out, but his fanatic followers have been causing a lot of trouble here. I'm not sure if you all heard that that Brazil's.
I've been keeping up with it. I think a lot of people have.
Yeah, there was an equivalent of the invasion of the capital here in Brazil. The Congress was invaded by followers of Bolsonaro. They demand a military coup. They demand that Bolsonaro returns to power despite the elections. They claim the elections were rigged. Well, and
sounds familiar.
Every time Brazil is getting more and more polarized between left and right, and well, what right activists emphasize is in one side individual freedom and the right to and they emphasize the capitalist side of society, so to say. At the same time, they tend to be religious conservatives, and on the left we have people enforcing social policies, and many people tending to socialism. And I had never heard a perspective that was at the same time individualistic but also preoccupied with social policies, preoccupied with social problems. And that is what Popper is, right? He advocates his particular form of individualism that also takes into account our societal preoccupations, our preoccupations with equality, with justice. And it was very different from the background I have. The background I have is from I am a leftist here in Brazil, so to say. So I've always heard that there was this choice to be made between socialism, which is the good choice, the right choice, the choice that emphasizes that people are equal, people deserve rights, and so on. And there was the choice between this and capitalism, which is the unjust choice, the wrong choice. And I found another perspective, and it was extremely interesting to see that. I am extremely sad that I have not yet got to the part where Popper talks especially about Marxism, but I've read The Poverty of Historicism, and I was very convinced by the book that, well, that historicists are wrong in their view of the world, and it was extremely interesting for me to see Plato's ideas, to see how totalitarianism goes back to at least 2000 and some years, to see the great ideas that Plato had, which were indeed extremely great. His ideas, his theory of forms and ideas, which is extremely creative, and it's really amusing to see Popper's exposure of that, and also is extremely amusing to see how he criticizes that. And well, my experience with the Open Society so far, again, unfortunately, I have not finished the book yet. I have not finished even part 1, but my experience has been great. I have been greatly influenced by it, and my idea of the importance of freedom of thought has grown a lot by reading it. My idea of the importance that we must have a way to manifest opposing ideas and to protect our rights to question the status quo. My idea of it has been greatly influenced by the book. Well,
Gabriel, you give me hope.
I'm looking forward to you reading the second volume and reading about Marxism. You're gonna love it. It's really good.
That's what I expect, for sure.
Yes. So I saw we have Lau, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, jumped in, and then I'll get to you, Nicolesi. Lau Mainsain, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. If you wanted to jump on, unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Let us know how you came across Popper, what your favorite book is. If you can't find the unmute, I'll just unmute you. Oh, no, you got it.
So I just clicked the link that Luke that given a few days ago. I'm actually not very familiar with what is the schedule, so that's why I'm joining now. The work I read mostly is in Chinese translation, actually, because I can read English. I'm from Malaysia anyway. Malaysia is in Southeast Asia. I have read his Open Society and sent me about 20 years ago, I think. That much I want to share. I just want to listen to the audience, how they are sharing. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's good to have you here. I'm not sure if Nicolesi, if you're still here with us, or if you've stepped away for a sec. So in terms of the schedule, I think we're up to the brainstorming session, aren't we, Rafe? I'm sorry, I can see you eating. Sorry to interrupt you. Do you want... Here, hang on one second. What's that?
Well, what if Margarita steps up and introduces the brainstorming session?
Sure, yeah. Did you want me to message her to come in,
Yeah.
or did you want to jump out for a sec, go back into the main room and grab her?
Well, what if
Or
you
I-
message her? She might come in here.
Sure. All right, I'll message her. In the meantime, just in case anyone hasn't seen, I'll just quickly share this document again. So we're kind of passing out this document just as like a networking way to stay in touch with everyone. Put your details on that document in the chat, and then we can all stay in touch and collaborate. Chris, did you want to say something?
I am Rafe champion, and I met his son during the last meeting. I met Rafe champion's son during the last.
Leo, yes.
Where is he now? He is not available, I think.
He couldn't make it, I don't think.
Oh, okay, just a friendly interaction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. I'll just quickly message Margarita. Yeah, so if anyone wants to just put in their details in that Excel spreadsheet, we want to do another kind of international meet and greet in June. So if anyone wants to write a paper or have a topic to discuss during that time, we have positions open for that. Or if anyone wants to help us as well, we could use some help.
I can signal that we're particularly wanting help with IT on the website. We want to have a more exciting, animated, eye-catching, effective website. And another thing, I think we want to get into online courses to circumvent the academic scene and get to people who are looking for philosophical answers or problem-solving techniques that they don't find at university and they don't find from academics generally.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's a big business of online learning. There's any number of platforms where material can easily be put up. You just have to know how to use them. You have to have the material to put up. And I think that's the kind of one, I think it might have been, if Steve didn't actually say that, it's certainly one of the things that fits fairly and squarely into his agenda to get outside of the unis and do it.
Yes, mass media.
Yeah.
Somebody has to create the content though in a compelling way, and they, that's I think part of it. I've looked at what is online that I can find, and some of it's good and some of it's pretty basic. There's a number, and in fact I tuned in an hour ahead of time. I miscalculated when this started, and for the hour before this I actually listened to Karl Popper himself. Somebody's gone through and translated a number of his conversations and put it up online that you can listen to. And it could probably be spread or things done to, I mean, that's what disappointed me. I would see some things where these oracular philosophers who just, they're garbled nonsense, get hundreds of thousands of views and Popper would get 60. It's like, what?
I've seen a terrible one on YouTube about someone talking about Immanuel Kant and how he was racist. And that has received, I think it's about 1 million views. And you read the comments of hundreds of comments of people saying, I'm studying philosophy. I used to love Immanuel Kant. Now I don't like him at all. He was blah, 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 blah. And it's because this guy took out of context what Immanuel Kant was. I had this argument with this other guy about what the difference is in color and race and intelligence and things like that. Immanuel Kant was obviously arguing against it, but he was saying it in such a way where it's like, so you're saying this then, and then people would take, oh, Immanuel Kant said this, and they just turned it into this whole racist thing. So it's really disheartening that those kinds of videos are the ones that get 1 million views and completely turn people off Immanuel Kant. And our Popper stuff is getting 100 views.
Well, that story with Kant is like one of Popper's experiences. He wrote a review of a book, and he put something in italics to make it different from the other thing. And someone who reviewed the article went through and pulled out all the bits in italics as though they were what Popper thought, but it was Popper pulling out statements he tended to criticise. So it's best precise. It's the same as a Kant thing. So Kant criticises something by saying it and then criticising it.
Yes.
But by saying it, suddenly
people take that.
What he said.
Yes.
Why do people not realize how intellectually horrible that is?
See, people who criticise Popper don't usually make the mistake of putting in blocks of what Popper actually said, because that would be very dangerous, because it enabled people to actually find out what Popper was saying. So you only get a garbled misrepresentation rather than decent-sized extracts that would give a naive reader a proper appraisal.
Yeah, it's terrible. And if more people just had it takes effort to research and find out what did Kant actually mean about this and to look it up. But unfortunately, people don't want to put in that effort. They just watch a YouTube video and they're convinced. So it's like, I guess, finding ways that we can counter that. But it's difficult. Truth is hard to come by, right?
Well,
okay.
Steve, you better put a few $1 million into this bloody online Popper learning instead of all those other courses you're supporting. Well, not maybe not millions, just a couple of 100,000.
Yeah, or start a university and make Ray Noble the director.
So what's become of
society, and I don't know if he even knows what the damn book was about. But the people take that. I've run into people who, because Soros and their politics differ, and he uses the Open Society in his names of his organization, and then they see that it comes out of Popper, they just turn off on Popper, and they might really like him. We're combating. It's a marketing problem, I think, if you really get down to it.
Yeah, I was going to say that it comes back to sales and marketing, and of course, academics like me just don't want to have anything to do with sales and marketing, and so we have to have a radical change of perception.
Yes.
It's all grubby.
Something entertaining, I think what Carl Sagan did for science and what Carl Sagan did for the philosophy of science was, and even Jacob Brovowski before him, was really amazing, because they talked about science and what it was and the method of science in a very entertaining way, and in a way that got people into science and things like that. So if we could create something similar, maybe a really cool, I don't know, documentary or film, I think that's going to be a game changer.
Yeah, that's the type of thing. Mind you, Feynman was probably the best, but all the philosophy he saw, he hated. He never discovered Popper's philosophy, even though he lived it. But he never struck a Popper in philosopher to tell him he was like the guy that spoke prose all his life without realising it.
Really? I didn't know that, because it's very Popperian.
Well, of course it is, but he never read Popper.
Oh, he figured it out for himself.
I'm sorry, who are you talking
As a,
about?
as a critical thinker,
Um,
he figured it out.
Richard
But
Feynman.
his son was doing philosophy, and he looked at his son's philosophy books, and he thought, this is absolute rubbish. Why do you waste your time?
I think that, Rafe, that waste of
I think
time.
one of the other issues just simply on campus is that kids are abandoning liberal arts
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's become too dogmatic or constricting. And they realize that if they're going to go into serious investment for their education, that maybe I better find something that's remunerative and I can actually still be permitted to think without being overly chastised by my professors. I think I see that happening on campus where people just not say what they really think, and that you didn't change anybody's mind, and they're just abandoning. You know, I'm a liberal arts major. I have a degree in philosophy. Well, okay, that is actually very practical in what it is I do for a living, though a lot of people wouldn't understand that directly. But education in general used to be exposure to many different strains of thought and epics of time and great literature, foreign languages. And I don't see the world working in that way. And if the world has gone to like an online experience and people only want to find what they want to find, well, we've got to be out there in that mix, because we're not going to break through the brick wall in academia, I don't think. Now, I'm glad that some of you are in there, like John, that are fighting the good fight from the inside. But you know, I think we got a better shot at doing an end. I use an American football term, an end around. Don't try to take through the middle of the line.
The vast majority of people in science very rarely read about the philosophy of science. One of the things that really struck me when I went into science was exactly that. I mean, there isn't a debate about Popper versus Kuhn or whatever, really. I mean, there is in the sense of the philosophers of science, but there isn't in science, you see. And I think that somebody just said something about the fact that philosophy and humanities and so on is seen as a waste of time. And I think that's unfortunately true for many scientists. And breaking the back of that in science, I think, is extremely difficult to get people to realize. I mean, for me, when I went into science, the idea that one created hypotheses and then worked out how to test those hypotheses, and particularly in relation to refutation, was something that was of significance and important. Most of science nowadays is an accumulation of enormous banks of data. If you take most of biology now, which is genomic led, what has been accumulated is vast amounts of so-called information about the human genome or the elephant's genome or whatever. And out of that, somehow or other, the solution will come. That somehow or other, looking at all these strange letters on a computer screen will come up with some answer to some amazing golden question and provide a golden bullet that will answer our problems. And that's I think has been the main problem of science in the modern era, that it's been seeking a golden bullet in medicine, for example, through the genomics project. And it doesn't really work by generating hypotheses and testing them. You know, the most disappointing thing, I'll just say this and then I'll stop. When I made my first presentation to a scientific society, which was the Physiological Society, when I was doing my PhD, and I was really eager and proud to do this, my very first scientific presentation to a major society, and I was rehearsing it within the department, and I decided that I had to state precisely what my hypothesis was and how I was testing it. And I was so disappointed because my supervisor, God bless him, said to me, I think you should take that out. And I said to him, but Alan, it's why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's the very nature of the question. And, you know, and he said, no, not, you know, he treated science as if it was like lifting a stone and seeing what was underneath it. And that somehow or other you could free yourself of any preconception about what was underneath it, that what was underneath it would be objectively presented, that there it would be, with no idea or preconception to it. And that holds in science right across the piece, that somehow or other, what you're trying to do is to distance yourself as far as possible from the problems that you're looking at. And I think that that's a fundamental problem that we face in on the academic side. I think it is beginning to change. I think that young people like Gabriel, for example, are coming through with much better ideas about the nature of scholarship, and who see that you know, there is a role that universities could play in recreating that kind of free thought and expression, and bringing back the idea that we have ideas about the world, which we then set about testing. But at the moment, I'm afraid that you know, if I look across the piece in biology, there's an enormous amount of data collection, with the notion that somehow or other the answers will be self-evident.
John, you had a question?
That was very interesting. I found what Ray just said. It seems like what you're saying is they're still going by what Popper called the Baconian myth of manifest truth somehow. Yeah. I was just gonna perhaps reiterate the idea that I think I think Steve should somehow make Ray into a rector of university somewhere. Maybe you could launch a campaign like that. I would love to see Ray in a position of responsibility.
I also just want to say hi to Nicolesi, who joined us. Nicolesi, did you want to introduce yourself? Let us know where you're from, what you love about Karl Popper's philosophy, things like that.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone, or good evening.
Hi.
It's
evening, morning, night.
Can you hear me? Yeah, it's 10:30.
Yes.
I'm in Sydney. I'm from Sydney.
Yeah.
As for where I'm from, I'm a citizen of the world. If that's a thing yet. If that's a thing. Look, I'm just observing at this stage, although, you know, I have a lot of input, as we all do. I believe that, like, we're getting inundated with a lot of information coming from, you know, from all angles. Karl Popper's got a lot of information in his book. What I've learned, the most important thing, and I probably grew up this way anyway, you know, before I even read Karl Popper, was just be critical. Just be critical. I think we have to keep it simple. You know, let's start with one important thing, let people understand the concept of it, and then move on to the next philosophy or the next theory, and then move on to the next one and next one. Otherwise, people get inundated with too much information, I feel, and then they don't pay attention, or they neglect philosophy, and they neglect learning about things in life. Personally, I think the way of the future is obviously everyone, like all humanity, has to participate. But not more importantly, I mean, just as important is trying to get this information out to younger people. Like recently, I'm surrounded a lot with my nieces and nephews, which are growing up. They're 5, 6, 7 years old, and the other day I saw something. I was just sent a message to Elise just for the fun of it. I thought I'll do some research on the internet. I saw something about Play-Doh for kids, you know. So I thought, why not introduce something where you know, you can introduce like a Karl Popper book for kids, kind of thing, like a children's book with quotes and sayings and, you know, fun activities and all sorts of things. Because otherwise, you know, as we get older, we do become more dogmatic. It's just a way of life. We sort of we establish our way, our personalities, our characters. Whereas if you're going to try and reach anyone, ideally you want to reach those younger people, you know, the ones that are going to grow up and spread this philosophy, because it's not a thing it may not even happen in our time. Well, that happens all the time in every generation, I believe, is that we're all trying to make a difference. We're all trying to make a change, you know, but to introduce something that's you know, as pinnacle or great as Karl Popper's philosophy, I think it just takes time. It takes a lot of time, perhaps. Could take, you know, could be in our generation, could be in the next generation. I mean, I know Elise, you know, she's a good friend of mine. I know she does humongous effort to try and get this change across. But we're talking about, you know, you're trying to influence not just your own friends and family, like you're trying to introduce this to like as a whole philosophy around the world, you know, which is what Plato has done. He's established this system, and this is hard to break. And to break it, it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. That's my input for now. Just one step, small steps, Ellie, small steps, you know.
Yeah, small steps, Ellie.
On being critical, and let's introduce that into our philosophical, into our education, into academics. Be critical. Let's start with that. Just that philosophy. Be critical, and then move on to the next one.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because like kids so often get in trouble for asking questions like, well, why, you know, why this, why that? And it's like, well, because I said so. And that's the answers they get. But if we can give them like in a children's book, for example, them feeling like questions are okay, criticisms are okay, and debating is okay, like then maybe they can feel like there's nothing wrong with them, where maybe in their home life they might feel that they're getting in trouble for being so curious. But then it's the trouble with that is that you have to sell it. It's the selling to the parents, because it's the parents that are buying the books. So you have to pitch it to the parents.
Well, it's also the children that influence the parents. I mean, you can't tell a kid what to watch on YouTube. You know, you go on some of these channels on YouTube, and they're getting billions of views. On YouTube, the highest viewed channels on YouTube are children's channels, and you got someone like Coco Melon, for example, billions of views. This kid, like the parents aren't telling the kids what to watch. They're the ones watching this. They're the ones they're the audience that like it and enjoy it. So if you put something forward that's enjoyable and fun for the kids, forget it. The parents won't even have a say in, oh, don't watch this or don't watch that. You know, the kids will just watch it because they find it interesting. They find it fun. And that's the thing, like, you know, when I'm around my nieces and nephews, you know, everyone just tells them, oh, don't do this, don't do that, don't go here, don't go there, don't touch this, don't touch that. Whenever I'm around them, I'll say, go touch it, see what happens. You know, go that way, run your head into the wall, see what happens. Like, he's not going to do it because he knows he's not going to. He goes, oh, well, this guy's now pushing me. He understands, like, if I do run myself into a wall, I'm going to hurt myself. Like, and they start realizing that. Whereas a lot of adults or parents or guardians, what they do to the kids is they go, don't do it. But why not? Like, you're killing the curiosity. You're killing the seed of creativity. I think it's just, don't work it out. You know, let them discover it, because that's what they're doing. I mean, 3 kids. My sister has 3 children, coming from the same parents, and yet they're all so very different. So we can't impose on people things that they're going to start, that they are as a person, as a character. They just, you grow up this way, you know. It's millions of years of evolution that we've inherited certain genes or certain characteristics, you know, of who we are, and that's the thing, that, you know, you have to find what you love and go for it, and there should be like an act where, you know, we're not being stopped from doing that. And that's, I think it all starts with with young kids, because we take them to school, we take them to a system that they're taught not to debate. We're taking them to a system where they're taught not to criticize, and that has to be like, let's put a stop to it. Let's allow the kids to go, why am I doing this? Well, what is this? Well, like, you know, certain teachers I had, you can just, you love listening to them because they teach you in a way where that you learn, you want to learn. And there's certain teachers, they're just you're just paraphrasing everything off a board, you know. But that takes time. These changes take time. We just have to one step at a time. That's what I believe.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Elise. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. So again, like Nick, if you want to jump onto that Excel spreadsheet and put in that information and your information, then maybe that's something that, you know, other people would be interested to collaborate and to put like a Popper for Kids kids book together, or children's book together. That'd be cool.
All right, okay. Now, did you say do you want me to write what I just said?
No, just go into the Excel spreadsheet and
Yep.
just put in your information.
Oh, okay. All right,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll do. Yeah, okay, got it. No, it's not there already, no. So I have to add it.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. No worries.
So we've just got someone new joining us. Sakban, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yes, good morning.
Hi.
Evening. Evening.
Good evening. Did you want to introduce yourself and let us know what you do, where you're from, how you came across Popper, anything else you want to share?
Okay, I'm from Indonesia.
Yeah.
East Asia. And I'm a teacher. Yeah, I'm a teacher in sport education. You know, sport education. So it's far away from philosophy. But actually, I've joined Mr. Jeremy forum for more than 1 year. Yeah, with Luke and Margareta. Yes, I'm a passive student actually. I'm a passive student. Yeah, but I'm interested in Popper philosophy, especially in critical rationalism, how to use the principle of falsification in producing valid knowledge. Producing valid knowledge. Okay, thank you for accepting me.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. Okay, so I guess I can just open up the floor to anyone that wants to ask questions or raise a topic in particular.
No,
Yeah, I'll jump in and say a little bit about the way scientific papers are written. This is what Ray was talking about, the way he was expected to write his paper. Now, Karl Popper persuaded Peter Medawar to write an article to reform the writing of scientific papers, to get them out of the crude empiricist mode of just throwing out some more information. And what Medawar wrote was, of course, to do precisely what Ray was doing. You start off by describing the general problem, or the specific problem situation in the field you're looking at. Like, what are the rival theories, or what are people concerned about? What are they worried about? Having said that, you then explain how you're going to attack this problem and how you're going to try and find out maybe a critical experiment which will make a difference between one or other of the competing theories. And then at the end of the paper, you look at the way you come from where the argument was at the start and what your bit of information has done to make a difference in that ongoing debate. Now, that was probably 60 years ago, and Popper thought at the time that maybe that made a difference. Well, clearly from Ray's experience, it didn't. People just revert back to like a stone rolling down a hill. They just roll down the hill back to the crude empiricist position where you just get data and put it out there and hope.
Rafe, yes, indeed. You know, in a sense, two heroes of mine. Medawar was one of them. The interesting thing about that is that when you look at scientific journals, increasingly the theoretical aspects of work was pushed out. And the style of writing the papers was such that you really, until you came to the conclusion part of the paper, theory was really very limited. So when you look at the introduction to scientific papers, in a sense there is theory there, but it's not stated in a concrete way. I used to say to my students that the best way of deciding what a paper is about is to go to the last 2 sentences of the introduction, and there it should tell you what the paper is about. The more I apply that test these days, the more disappointed I become in being able to do that. But I used to teach my students to do that. I used to say to them, look, there's a real simplistic approach. And the reason why it's simplistic is because there's a simplistic way in which scientific papers are now presented. They're formulaic. What happens in the introduction is not the laying out of a hypothesis as such, but a little bit of background literature. And then what happens in the discussion is that what's presented is interpreted, as it were, in the context of whatever the original question might have been. But certainly science did not follow Medawar's suggestion in relation to how scientific papers should be written. It's very data-led. Information content takes precedence over ideas. And sometimes many journals will actually take the ideas bits out and tell you that you should either present this to a different journal, Phil Trans of the Royal Society, for example, rather than in, say, the Journal of Physiology. It wasn't always like that. Back in the 1950s, when Hodgkin and Huxley were presenting their papers on how action potentials, nerve impulses were generated in axons, they laid out precisely what their methodology was, both in terms of the mathematics of it, but also in terms of how they were setting about testing it. What the importance was of clamping the voltage, holding the voltage constant across the membrane, and looking at the effect of that on the transfer of ions across the membrane, of different ions, of potassium ions, sodium ions, and so on. All that was theoretically led and then experimentally tested. And you can see that when you go back to the Hodgkin-Huxley papers, that's one of the things that you see, that their hypothesis is stated reasonably clearly. But you certainly wouldn't get that now in most scientific journals.
Hello, if I may interrupt for a moment. Thomas Hanschel just arrived, so we are getting to a close for the general meet and greet. And but actually you can continue, some of you, if you want to continue talking, that is fine. But for those of you who want to join the brainstorming session, you can either do it yourself by clicking on the breakout room feature and choose room number 2, or we can do it for you.